headliner takes over the rostrum at the National Press Club in Washington. The men who cover the Capitol scene are regaled by Alfred Hitchcock, the master of suspense, who has some comments about his latest picture.
For over 30 years now, I have been indulging in the occupation of raising goose flesh domestically and in England. I have only recently completed work on the latest picture. The title is quite short, just 2 words. There were 3, but we cut the first word for and call it simply The Birds.
Welcome to the Shamley Silhouette, yet another analysis of the master of suspense, Alfred Hitchcock. I'm your host, Zach Eastman. We're into episode 2 of the second half of the Shamley Silhouette series. I want to thank everybody for the patience they've had in the break that we took to get some more episodes down the pipeline, but also to figure out a way to wrap up this series. And we've got some great ideas coming through, and I think by I want to say the end of June we should have a wrap-up, unless I decide to go a little further. You know, Alfred Hitchcock made a lot of movies, one of which we can't talk about because it's fucking lost. So if you know where the Mountain Eagle is, contact the British Film Institute, who will then contact me via secret radio ring, like in the shadow, and it'll be an amazing experience for all of us all around. And I want to thank last episode's guest, Marshall Rosales, for coming down to talk for 3 hours on 3 different Hitchcock misses, Jamaica Inn, Torn Curtain, and Topaz. It was a very interesting discussion and made me realize that me and Leonard Maltin are still the only ones who like Topaz. So, whatever. We can have our own little club. I'm sure Leonard Maltin and I can get together, have some popcorn, and watch Topaz together and appreciate it for how much it is doing. But we're going to move along as we normally do, and this time we're going to actually talk about a major success in Hitchcock's career. Undeniably, Psycho is the peak of his powers when it comes to the golden age of Hitchcock, as well as just Hitchcock's career in general. Nothing gets higher than Psycho. How do you top that? Do you do another spy film with Cary Grant or another film with Jimmy Stewart about a more average man who gets tangled up into a situation? Do you do, any kind of number of things that Hitchcock could be doing? And instead he chooses to make a monster movie to the respect of the idea of nature turning on man, taken from a short story by Daphne du Maurier, who provided 2 different stories for Hitchcock in the past. This time it's from a short story called The Birds. And Hitchcock takes this, changes the setting from Cornwall to Bodega Bay, and creates undeniably film history. With that come positives and negatives. Now, here to discuss the film with me is a guy that I've been wanting to get on the show for a while, because he does a wonderful show with his co-host Cody, called Punk Rock Horror Podcast, where amongst the milieu of horror that they discuss, they also promote punk rock bands. They have 2 other side shows, one of which Paranormal Princess does that I've listened to. If you haven't listened to it, check it out. Their recent episode, as of this recording, discusses 2 different Ted Bundy movies. And you gotta give it up for these guys willing to talk about the subjects that just make you want to set yourself on fire because they're just so depressing. But and on top of that, he is an accomplished horror aficionado, and I couldn't think of a better person to come in and talk about Hitchcock's only monster movie than Matthew McCord, aka Undead Matt.
Thank you, man. Thanks for having me come on.
Thank you for coming down. I appreciate it.
Cody sends his love, by the way. He says he's sorry he can't make it.
Virtual hug to Cody. And on the other end, I got to tell you, Now, we met primarily. I listened to your show prior, but the way we met in person for the first time was I won a contest, which I've never won before.
Talk about like small world kind of stuff.
Exactly. And it's but it was we went to a screening of it, Chapter 2 in IMAX, which I mean, I dug the movie. I really enjoyed it, but just talking with you afterwards and your knowledge base is massive when it comes to this genre.
I'm glad to know it didn't go completely to waste.
Oh no, not at all. And actually, I remember one of my favorite episodes that you've done within the last year was talking about the Michael Haneke Funny Games, which I appreciated because you're talking about a director who remakes his own work, which is a very touchy area to adapt. And oddly enough, Hitchcock did the same thing with The Man Who Knew Too Much.
I mean, man, when it comes to like remakes, it's you can't really argue it's a bad remake if it's the same guy remaking it.
Yeah, it's very hard to push that. But I mean, I've always been of the opinion that like Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 is a more heightened remake of the first one to a certain degree. Yeah. Obviously, the plot's different, but like the aesthetics and the intent is the same as the first one, but then it just amps it up to the level of 80s nonsense.
Yeah.
And it's also a wonderful film, and Dennis Hopper wields 2 chainsaws like a crazy person. I love it.
Yeah.
But I brought you on for this Shamley episode primarily because Hitchcock has a lot of cred in the horror world, but in the realistic sense, if we're talking about traditional horror tropes, he only makes really 3, which would be Psycho, The Birds, and Frenzy.
Yeah.
And this one in particular, I think, is the most horror-laden if people want to divide the subject up. I mean, I could argue that Shadow of a Doubt is a horror movie because it's about a killer, stalking people throughout this small town. But
I mean, if the question is what considers to be a horror movie, it always comes down to a few key factors. I mean, horror can sometimes be confused for like crime or thrillers, and so when we're looking at horror, we're looking at things that go into more of a morbid area.
Yeah.
So I mean, a good example of that would be like Pet Sematary.
Yeah.
And the reason I bring that one up is because the whole thing behind it is, pets coming back from the grave, the undead, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's already jumping into this really dark territory of life coming back, even though life has already been depleted.
Yeah.
Whereas, if you looked at that and made it a movie about a kid dealing with the grief that he lost his pet, then now you have a drama.
Yeah.
Because he's dealing with grief, and now you took away, the undead part of that.
Yeah.
And so, and maybe that's a little bit of a rough example, but, horror isn't everything. And that's why we even started the Punk Rock Horror Podcast, was because we firmly believe that horror is given the tail end of respect.
Undeservedly so.
Yeah, because we're talking about Alfred Hitchcock, and he's one of probably the biggest names in the film industry. He's, a huge film study, and even only having to make a few movies that have horror in them, and even some that aren't even directly centered around horror, like, obviously those movies are talked about. Everybody knows what Psycho is.
Yeah.
Everybody knows those scenes. Everybody knows the shower scene. And when you think about it, it's like, I always bring up Die Hard, like, as my go-to example. I don't know why, but like, everybody thinks of like, Bruce Willis, jumping out of this building and like crashing in. That's a huge scene. Everybody's going to think about that. And then when you think of something more simplistic, like that scene in Psycho where she's getting killed in the shower, it's a very simple scene. Like, even that, it's not even blood going down the drain. If I remember right, I think it is like a mixture of like chocolate syrup and something else.
Yeah.
I forget what it is, but it's a really simple scene to shoot. And yet it's lasted like decades upon decades upon decades. And so, I think when we talk about horror, when we talk about horror in movies, we really need to be really careful to remember what that is. So as long as it's going into talking about a certain grief or a dark, part of a tale, that's what we're looking at with horror. That's what it is. I mean, even Disney has horror in its creations. Yeah. Whether it's something as traumatic as The Black Cauldron to something as more simple as like and obvious as Halloween Town.
Yeah.
Like, that whole thing is like horror for kids.
Yeah.
I mean, that one, without going too far off, the one scene in that movie is the taxi driver when he's just all pissed off, like because like the whole town's got that bad juju going around them. I forget what happened. Like I know it's like some sort of curse,
right?
But he's just like all angry, like that scared the living shit out of me when it happened because he's just an angry skeleton. So and I was just like,
it jumps you back, and Disney is not an unfair figure to construe within horror. Like even as far back as the first animated feature he did, Snow White, the sequence where she's through the forest and the trees are grabbing at her, that's a horror sequence for children. I
mean, and even Evil Dead had, it had trees who and I guess you could argue a tasteful manner, kind of like raped a woman.
Yeah.
And whatever about that, man. Like Sam Raimi, that dude's wild. Like I have massive respect for that guy.
Yeah. No, he's willing to push a boundary that you wouldn't expect. And it's interesting because I think that he's one of the last forebearers of slapstick. And just in the way the Coen brothers are like the last bastion of screwball comedy. Yeah. Like Sam Raimi understands slapstick like nobody's business. Like Army of Darkness is one of the best slapstick movies ever made.
I've talked about it before on the podcast. My favorite scene from Army of Darkness, like one of my favorite jokes, is when the whole Army of the Dead is finally attacking the castle, and you just see the one soldier playing the femur bone. Yeah. Just like a little battle flute. Like it's so random. It's such a stupid scene.
But it works. It absolutely works.
I mean, after the whole scene where Ash fights himself, like I'm just like, yeah, whatever at this point.
Yeah. So going into it, before we dive into the birds, what as a horror fan and a horror aficionado, I guess if I were to assume like the Hitchcock enters your life through one of those three films, but I won't assume. So how do you get into somebody like Alfred Hitchcock?
So for me, man, so I've talked about before on the podcast, like I have ADHD and anxiety, manic depression, PTSD, the whole smattering of stuff. And so when I was a kid, my anxiety especially my ADHD was at its peak, it was, so because of that, it was really hard for me to go to sleep at night. And then even to wake up, at a decent time. I'd either wake up way too late or way too early. And so, the days that I'd wake up way too early before school, I'd be up probably about like 5 or 6 a.m. Yeah. School doesn't start till about 7 or 8. And so Sci-Fi at the time would just play like old classics. So like they'd play old Twilight Zone and also old Hitchcock stuff. And so, because nothing else was on at the time, keeping in mind, like this was back in like the 90s, so like it's not like we had like Netflix at the time, whatever was on TV was ever on the TV.
Yeah, you just accepted it. And
like it. Cartoon Network, Adult Swim really wasn't as what it is now, and so they would mainly play like infomercials and shit. So Sci-Fi was like the only channel that we had that was playing something like throughout 24/7 loop. Right. And so I would just watch these shows and wait for my mom to wake up to take me to school, and I just would keep watching Hitchcock and I'd keep watching Twilight Zone, and that's where I got my like first interest into it.
So was it the Alfred Hitchcock Presents show, or was it?
It was the Alfred Hitchcock.
Okay, right
show.
On. Yeah. And then that's a subject that we haven't truly probed on the show, other than the humorous monologues at the beginning or the intros and stuff. But that anthology is very influential in the way the Twilight Zone is. I'd say. Different but similar realms, like they all kind of intertwine.
It was definitely like that was like definitely in the era of like I mean, obviously they're made in different times, but like those two were being played at the same time as like even like Sylvester Stallone was the exact opposite of Jean-Claude Van Damme. There was always something that was the exact opposite of something else. Like Pepsi and Coke, whatever. Yeah. That's what it was, man. Like it was you're either in both camps. Either or one. I was in both. I loved both of them. I loved Twilight Zone a little bit more for specific, elements, and I also loved Hitchcock's stuff for more narrative elements. And so, like, there's pros and cons with both if you compare them. But that's where I got my intro to Hitchcock.
Yeah, and then obviously that blossoms naturally into the milieu of Hitchcock, like, and specifically with Psycho, The Birds, and even Frenzy. Which Frenzy, I think, is a film that you have to work up to, because it's much more. Even to this day, it's still a very effective and terrifying film on its own merits.
Well, I think what's hard about Hitchcock films sometimes is that I think people go in expecting to be terrified because when he came out with his movies, you know, like things like Psycho and The Birds weren't seen. You know, you didn't see people getting stabbed. You didn't see creature features at that extent. I mean, we had creature features like, you know, giant obscure ants or salamander lizards just like attacking
the atomic age.
Like,
paranoia.
there was that stuff, but you didn't see anything where it was like normal birds attacking people. And in Hitchcock, what made him brilliant at the time is that he was touching on fears that people didn't know they had.
Yeah.
You know, because it's like in The Bird specifically, I would argue that it touches on the whole aspect of, you know, man is the top of the food chain, but what if the food chain decides to finally strike back?
The thing you take for granted turn on you. Yeah. And that's it's a big through line in The Bird specifically.
Like, I mean, and if you kind of like on the more humorous side, if you think about it, like, you know, you see all those videos of like someone getting chased by a goose. So it's, I mean, to say that the fear isn't there would be incorrect because obviously it is.
It's funny that you bring that up because one of the impetuses for The Birds coming into existence as a motion picture stems from two factors, both of which you've brought up, and I love the transition. It's awesome. So The Birds, the original short story by Daphne du Maurier, takes place in Cornwall, and it's according to the production designer on The Birds, it was much more of a mood piece in his opinion. It's not really a straight through narrative. Yeah.
So I always thought that. I'm sorry, I'm interrupting.
No, you're all good.
I always thought that Alfred Hitchcock aimed for more of an art house type of style for his films, more than he leads on. I mean, I will argue that. I mean, it's not like he's going to come back from the grave and argue with me. If he did, then I think I would give it to him.
Matt, you're full of shit.
I know, right? Like, just like his ghost sits in here, I'd probably like.
Oh, he's come on the show more than once to curse and swear. Jimmy Stewart does that too. And
I will have you know.
Matt. You don't know what you're fucking talking about. Alma, give me my book.
I will tape a bird to your forehead. I did it to Tippy. I'll do it to you.
Oh God. Oh, we'll get to that. But yeah, Robert Boyle, the production designer of The Birds, he brings in like he extracts it as a mood piece and kind of starts designing some stuff.
Yeah.
But the premise is initially bought for an Alfred Hitchcock Presents episode.
Yeah.
That was the original intent. And then within the span of development, obviously he makes North by Northwest and Psycho, and he's looking for his next project. And there were actual attacks by birds in the early 60s.
Yeah.
One of the bigger ones in particular, it took place in Capitola, California in August of 61, and a group of birds seemed to attack the entire community. The quote I have on through here is, hordes of seabirds were dive-bombing their homes, crashing into cars and spewing half-digested anchovies onto lawns, which all sounds hilarious in retrospect 50 years down the line.
Right.
And supposedly the cause was toxic algae that the birds have eaten and kind of drove them crazy and whatnot. And there's a scattered other bird attacks that kind of influence the mind of Hitchcock to be like, this would make a good story. So he hires Evan Hunter to write the script, and he basically tells Evan Hunter, like, we're pretty much eliminating everything from Daphne du Maurier's story except the title and the fact that birds are attacking people. So no more setting it in Cornwall, no more mood piece. It's got to be a straightforward narrative. So Evan Hunter develops a story that is decidedly American in its approach, and also stretches out and adds elements that thematically divide the film between both a horror movie and a love story. But meld the two together to create this very poignant allegory, while at the same time operating the way a monster movie should. And it's inherent to point out, amongst other things, that this movie's 2 hours long. At a time when a monster movie would run the gamut of anywhere from 70 to 90 minutes at tops. More specifically, if you're talking about Universal Horrors past, like outside of a scattered few, most of the films are running from 70 to 80 minutes, so they pack a lot in.
Well, and you know, man, and when you think about it, it's kind of amazing that it's that long, because even like King Kong back then, both iterations, like, were just, you know, not as long, or, as birds, and with the grand scale of something like King Kong, he's fighting dinosaurs and being in New York, and I mean, everybody knows the tale of King Kong. If you don't know the tale of King Kong, I don't know what to tell you.
I know one particular director, I won't say his name, but he knows how to take 90 minutes and stretch it out into 3 and still make it great. I love that King Kong remake, but it is very long.
I love it too, man. I mean, we could talk about King Kong too if you want.
Oh, dude, I'm debating doing Jackson as a subject.
I mean, that's another, again, coming back to how horror, I mean, I don't know if the listeners heard it or going to hear it, but we talked about how horrors and everything.
Yeah.
And so, like, again, like, Peter Jackson got to start out with a horror franchise. Like, he made horror movies first.
Yep.
Before he ever made Lord of the Rings, before he made King Kong or anything else, he made horror movies.
Yep. He made 2 different genres, like straight up horror films and puppet fucking movies.
Yeah. one of my favorite, I forget what movie it was on, but one of the behind the scene photos I've seen was with Peter Jackson talking to one of the actors, and he's already in makeup and prop where it's like half of his lower half
from Brain Dead, Dead Alive.
Thank you. That's I thought it was Dead Alive. I just wasn't positive.
Well, it's got 2 different titles too, so it's like sometimes it gets confusing.
And I also have never seen any behind the scene photos. Like finding that movie for me is just such a pain in the ass. Like
it's the Blu-ray's out of print.
It's one of the hardest movies to find. Supposedly Rob Zombie owns every horror movie ever made, which I don't know Rob Zombie, but I mean, on the show we've researched enough that there's some movies that you can't find. So I don't know, man. Maybe I need to go shoot him an email and be like, "Hey, man, I'm not asking you to come on the show. Can I just borrow Brain Dead from you? Can you mail it to me? I'll mail it back."
I like the idea that Rob Zombie's got his own version of the Disney Vault, where he could could feasibly do that whole thing, be sure to buy Dead Alive before it goes back into the zombie vault.
Well, and this is legit too, because I read this in Fangoria years ago, and it's just he apparently owns every single horror movie ever.
Ooh.
Supposedly he does.
Maybe he has the Mountain Eagle. I mean, I know it's not strict. It's not a horror movie, but maybe he just has it because I get a bulk of some. Maybe he has it.
But I mean, being Rob Zombie, heck, could you imagine opening a letter from oh, hey, this is a fan. Maybe they're asking me for an autograph, and it's just, hey, can I borrow Brain Dead?
You're like, well, I've never had this request before.
I don't know if I should be insulted or not.
Sherry, take a look at this. Do you think this is a joke?
If he does own every horror movie, he doesn't really show it in his directing.
Yeah,
and that sounds like a shade at him. It's not. It's just more so. I've noticed that Rob Zombie in his most recent films doesn't really, go away from his wheelhouse. And I know, I mean, I guess you could argue, someone like Martin Scorsese doesn't do that either.
Right.
But Martin Scorsese still brings out a really good tale throughout his movies. It's still something you can, you find yourself getting invested in.
Right.
I mean, The Irishman is 3.5 hours.
And The Irishman is a reckoning for his entire career.
Right. And it's a great movie. Check it out. I had to watch it in chunks, but still, it's a fantastic film.
Fantastic film.
But Rob Zombie, I always think he keeps trying to go for a shock value. And there's nothing wrong with that because that's a homestay in horror in general. But with always trying to go for shock value, eventually people know you're going to try to go for shock value.
Right.
So when you have, Sherry Moon, and keep in mind, I haven't seen the latest film he's done yet.
Oh, Three from Hell, yeah.
Yeah, I just haven't seen it yet.
Neither have I,
When you got Sherry Moon coming on saying, fuck shit and blasphemous stuff against God, or even Bill Moseley, which by the way I love Bill Moseley. Dude's a fantastic actor. He has some great variety. He's very versatile. He one of his best scenes was in Devil's Rejects where he's just talking about I am God, there is no God. That whole speech.
I'm the devil and I'm here to do the devil's work.
I am the devil. And, that was amazing. But now we've experienced that, so you're not going to throw anything our way that isn't going to surprise us now.
Yeah, and it's actually before we get back to Hitchcock, I did want to touch on this because it's interesting. Rob Zombie was originally there was a movie he had in development that I thought would have been, it could have potentially been the greatest of his career. Was Raised Eyebrows. He was going to do the Groucho Marx story, which Raised Eyebrows, if you've never heard of it. has kind of could have had a Hitchcock vibe to it as well if he had approached it this way. I don't know, but it's based on a memoir by Steve Stoliar, who lived in Groucho's house during the final years, and it's Groucho's Sunset Boulevard, and the main antagonist in the piece is a woman named Erin Fleming, who I would have assumed Sherry would have played it, and I think she actually would have been good in the role.
Yeah.
But that would have been a way for him to deviate, and I think that was probably a project that couldn't just get financing.
And he's shown that he's done it before. Like, he can do it. Like, Salem gets a lot of shit.
Oh, I love Lords of Salem.
But, yeah, Lords of Salem is still, like, a fantastic... Like, so, even though it gets a lot of shit because it's mostly, like, a slow burn of a movie.
Yeah.
I would say, like, it's one of his better movies that deviates from what he normally does.
Exactly.
I mean, it still has his aesthetic to it, but he's definitely going for more of a calm, slow burn type of psychological type of feel.
Yeah.
And he can do that. Like, he's shown he can do that with Halloween 1 and 2, which I know those movies get shit too, but on the, PRHP, we love them because Cody put it perfectly. It shows what would actually happen to someone if they were being, followed and chased by a serial killer.
Yeah, if the concept of Michael Myers was a tangible reality, because like Carpenter's films, like I'm a Halloween nut. Carpenter's film and the subsequent sequels deal much more with Michael as a supernatural concept of evil, a construct like that. Rob Zombie breaks it down. Like, I mean, and I have mixed feelings on the remakes, but if I separate them out from like the legacy of Halloween, they are perfectly well constructed films on their own. I think the second one is actually a wonderful film about PTSD.
Oh, like, and I get it. Like, the biggest criticism against it is because they don't do justice to Jamie Lee Curtis's character from the original films. And,
right.
I mean, whatever, man. Like, it's Jamie Lee Curtis. She started out as a scream queen. No one's gonna ever take that torch from her.
No.
And to even live up to that is a huge, huge expectation.
And I think Scarlett Taylor Compton does a good job with those.
Yeah,
roles.
I mean, she did great. I don't agree with the criticism, but that is just the criticism.
Yeah, exactly.
That is against it.
Yeah, no, and it's a total like. I mean, and again, it's an affectation of, or like, Hitchcock deals with this similarly the way that Rob Zombie does, where it's like a style is expected, and more often than not, Hitchcock subverts it.
Yeah.
And, obviously the business has changed since Hitchcock was alive, to the point where stock and trade might be a little bit more of a valuable commodity than, expanding out. But like when Zombie can, stretch his muscles, he stretches his muscles to a beautiful effect.
Well, and I think probably one of the most disappointing movies I've ever seen that I had a lot of faith in was 31.
Yeah.
That one was rough, man, because the opening monologue of that scene is
with Richard Brake,
is fantastic. He does a really great job, and then just kind of the rest of the film just feels like it's like the passion is there, but it just does not execute it well.
Right.
Like it's the same reason why I was bummed out by Overlord. Like, it's a fantastic action movie.
Yeah.
It's really cool. Nazi Germany, kicking Nazi asses.
Wyatt Russell. Yeah, I dig
awesome. But the execution just for a lot of the scenes and a lot of the elements of that movie just leave a lot to be desired, man. Like, it's still good. Like, give it a shot. But it's definitely not one of, like, the most like head-turning horror movies you're ever gonna see.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've always thought of Overlord as primarily like it's a World War II movie first and a horror movie second, and it clearly shows that with the way it's drawing out certain scenes of tension.
Well, I mean, I can touch on it if you want. I don't want to. I mean, I can touch on my big thing. What really, just one example, if you want, of why I didn't really what made it kind of a disappointment to me. I don't know. I just don't want to take away from the whole Hitchcock talk.
No, go right ahead. Yeah.
So one scene in that movie is if you're planning to watch it, I'll try not to spoil it. But basically, you find out. I mean, Nazis are doing experiments on people trying to create this super soldier kind of thing, and so like that's just basically like a rough overview. And so they started testing on villagers where they set up shop. And so one of them they tested on was this girl's aunt. And, we see our heroes living in this house, or not living, but taking sanctuary in this house from the enemy.
Right.
And so, the niece is just like, don't go up there. My aunt's in there. She's not okay. They did things to her, experiments, and it really builds a very ominous nature. And it even does like a close-in shot on like the door that's creaked into a room, and you see her just like walk by really quick. And so you're just like, oh shit. something's gonna happen later on where she's gonna burst out. Maybe she'll attack the heroes. Maybe she'll attack the Nazis. Who knows? Later on in the movie, Nazis find where the heroes are staying in that house, so they go and investigate it, and they go up to the ants room, and you're like, oh shit, the ant's gonna kill the Nazis kind of scene. Like, you're getting ready for this like bloody battle, like the ant's probably gonna die, but she's gonna take a few of them with her, like it's gonna be nuts. Kind of like even so intense where it's just like even reminiscent of like Inglourious Bastards, where they're in that bar scene, and these things are getting nuts. And then as they're escaping the Nazis, you just see a cutaway scene, or not even a cutaway scene, but a faraway shot of where the ant gets supposedly shot, and then blood appears on a window, and you don't see anything else. And that's what I'm talking about, because like that scene would have been far better if they shown what happened in that room. Because you don't get to see it. You just know that there's a struggle, and then gunfire, and then blood on a window, and that's it. And that's what really bums me out, man. Because like Overlord had this really big potential of having, an A movie, budget scale to fulfill on a B movie effect level,
and it didn't deliver on the promise.
And it didn't. And it was just kind of a letdown, because you're just like, it really builds up like this scene, like the ant's gonna fuck shit up, and maybe it's an extended scene, I don't know. But for the fact that like they didn't even like do anything for the final cut, and it's just like faraway shot, blood on window, you're just like, oh,
it's in a diametric opposition to something like Psycho, where you have a setup like the mother in the house near the motel, and you actually see, well, not mother, but the executions of actions by mother, up close and personal, and that's something that like Hitchcock does. That Overlord, I agree, it kind of spares out moments that it could utilize that B movie horror effect. Hitchcock takes something like Psycho, which is a B movie plot, and elevates it while not skimping on the terror and the visual.
Well, because he gives you a first person view to it in more than one way, like either like as the killer himself, via Psycho, or like even in the birds, like like he's making you see these animals attack these people, and the terror, and to be entering in a phone, it's just like he's making you go through it. And when you take the audience out of something like that, then you're taking this the trap, the feeling that you want them to have, the fear, the terror, the vulnerability. And it's not a good horror movie if you can't really deliver on that in some sort of way. I mean, even Ari Aster does it by touching into more of a mental type of stuff. With like Midsommar talking about like heartbreak and that kind of stuff. And, even Hereditary even being about grief. And so like when you take the audience out of that, then it's just like, well, then why should I be scared? Like, like you might as well be going through a haunted house and then have the guy take off his mask and be like, oh, no, hey, my name is Steve. I'm actually not a guy with a chainsaw that's going to chase you. Like, that would kind of ruin it, right?
I would love, like, at the same time, I'd love a horror movie to do that.
Like obviously, like, I know it's not real. But when you take away that, like, thin line of, like, disbelief and whatnot, like, our suspension of belief, it's just like, oh, well. Okay.
No, exactly. and the thing that, like, there are ways to do restrained horror and overt horror, like, but they can work simpatico with each other. And like something like Overlord not embracing that subjective view that it could have with the mother scene is in opposition to something like Hitchcock doing with the birds, where it kind of puts you right in the middle of that person's point of view. And Tippi Hedren specifically in that scene with the glass phone booth, we'll get into it in a second, but she's, we are experiencing her terror within that moment after entering that little area. And in Overlord, the setup of the bomb, if you will, of the ant not going off through a thematic sense is a letdown. And it's almost like you're fumbling with the bomb theory that Hitchcock supposes within Overlord. And I agree, it's a little disappointing in that respect. I mean, I still like the movie, but there's obviously like there's issues that are inherent within it based off the way they chose to execute some stuff. But we'll get into the birds now. But I would love to talk more about Overlord at some point, because because there's a part of me that has a duality on my opinion about that, because there's like certain things that it's doing on a different level that I appreciate. But then the horror element kind of has a letdown to it. But with the birds, the key things to go into this film is, amongst other things, this is the Hitchcock was a master craftsman when it came to prepping his films, breaking down the scenes with storyboards, and basically being ready to film. This is the one of the rare films where Hitchcock has to kind of fly by the seat of his pants because of the technology that's being used to create the effect of the birds. And, you know, at the end of the day, the birds is a situation where this could have easily been a nightmare, like a nightmare, like in the final product. And it ends up being a film that, if you watch the Blu-ray of the birds on a 4K TV, the special effects hold up insanely well. Yeah. In a way that Birdemic can't hold up on any print. But again, Birdemic's, you know, its story is different, but it will be discussed because it is a very birds-inspired film with what it's doing. But the nature of the birds, you can't talk about the birds without first bringing up, before the plot, Ub Iwerks, who was a Disney guy. Yeah. Basically designed Mickey Mouse, worked within special photography at the Disney studio. And the best way for the birds to be achieved was through the sodium vapor process, which was yellow screen. Blue screen had been utilized up to this point in a primary function and facet because it was the quicker way to do things. But there was, and if you watch the documentary on the Blu-ray all about the birds, they talk about the fact that the blue screen process, because its lighting is different than how the sodium process works, there was a blue hue that would encompass the people or the subject that was being filmed in the diametric opposition of a background. So the yellow one uses two different sources of lighting in order to eliminate that halo. And that's how you're able to achieve something like the birds, not just for the process shots and matte shots of people walking, but also the birds themselves. And I think it's a process that, like, pretty much it's a forebearer to CGI and filming in front of a green screen the way, I mean, it's not a nice example, but the way George Lucas made the prequels, I mean, like, nothing wrong with that, but there's a forebearer to it of just like, how can we improve this process? And Ub Iwerks was instrumental in doing that, combined with Albert Whitlock's matte paintings. You get a true feeling of terror in this town known as Bodega Bay. We'll jump right into it. The opening credits, the design, it's not Saul Bass, it's another guy, but has that Saul Bass feel to it, the way Psycho did, where, like, something intriguing is happening within the opening and gets you ready for it. And the first thing you notice, no score. Score is all done on electronic. It's one of the earliest examples of electronic score. Bernard Herrmann is the supervisor of where that sound is placed, but it generally is just the electronic manipulation of sound within it, and it's using a synthesizer called the Mixture Tritonium, and it was made in West Berlin. And Hitchcock and Bernard Herrmann go over to West Berlin to hear the pitch by these guys on how to utilize different sounds, and this ends up being the impetus for the birds. And I think it's a score. Yeah. If we want to, because Forbidden Planet has a very similar situation where the score is not traditional; it's a very electronic thing. But this is the forebearer of stuff that we get today with virtually anything Nicholas Winding Refn makes.
Yeah, right. And like, I mean, that's why, like, the birds has always been such, like, a great subject for film studies, or even just kind of anyone a fan of film in general, just because it was basically what you're touching on is just like the turning point of, like, a more technical process for movies to be made, and how they're made and the effects behind them, and and it kind of, like, in a lot of ways, like, the way I guess I want to relate it is, like, Kubrick was much in the same way as Hitchcock was, with how much control he wanted over his film and how detail oriented he was. And so, you see that a lot with the birds. You see that a lot with attention to detail and everything that he wanted in every single one of those shots. Yeah. And I don't want to get, like, too far ahead, but one could argue, what is what is the cost of a good shot, you know?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But on a more technical side of things, like there was a good turning point. Like it showed that films could be taken from just a regular reel to, and you know, what we already knew how they were made, to something what we know now, where it's like either you have these giant operatic, you know, symphony orchestras making just, you know, quirky sounds for a comedy movie, or over the top, you know, scenes for like Star Wars or whatever. To, you know, even just like what we're talking about, of like even it just being one dude making music for one indie film. You know, it's kind of insane that it all started. I wouldn't say with the Birds, but I do want to say like it pioneered that. It showed that this is possible.
Yeah, it's definitely like among the earliest examples of like this is where it can go. And then John Carpenter arguably streamlines it with his scores for not just Assault on Precinct 13, but also just like everything going forward, especially like, you know, The Thing. Morricone does the music, but there's also a lot of Carpenter in there, because a lot of Morricone's score is not used for that film. And so it's a way with the Birds to hook you into just the atmosphere of it. And like there's only one piece of actual music, or traditional music, in the film, and that comes later in the plot. But we have this very chaotic opening credit sequence, and then we fade into San Francisco, and kind of coming down the street, and Tippi Hedren's walking by. A boy whistles at her, and she turns and gives a coy look. It's actually a reference to an ad that she had done that ran over the Today Show, for another company that Hitchcock saw, and then that's what drew his attention to Tippi Hedren. So there was a little wink and a nod there. You also get Hitchcock's cameo walking out the store with his two dogs. So
doing cameo, with respect to him, doing cameos way before Stanley. R.I.P.
You think they're just sitting up there talking about like who was better at cameos than the other?
Oh, it's Stanley. I mean, Hitchcock started it, but Stanley perfected it.
Listen, true believer. You may have walked by, but I had dialogue.
I had dialogue. Exactly, man.
I hung out in space. I cut Chris Hemsworth's hair. What did you do?
I hung out with the Watchers. Did you hang out with the Watchers? No, you didn't. You looked at Tippi Hedren.
I drove a school bus. You walked off a train with a big violin a cello. Yeah, but
just like some mad dissing going up there.
Look, I don't read your funny books. I never gave a shit. Spider who?
Just like slaps him. You know who it is. Spider-Man, you son of a bitch. Just like they get nuts.
Just.
I've been this insulted since I worked with Jack Kirby.
Oh my God!
Touching on some touchy geek history.
Touchy subject there, because everybody has an opinion, and then there's also realities. But you know, like, so we got the cameo out of the way and whatnot. We enter this bird shop, and already we're, you know, setting up the motif of the film and whatnot. And Tippi Hedren plays Melody Daniels, socialite. You know. Bit of a prankster, bit of a practical joker, if you will. And
kind of like she was definitely made in like what the modern, you know, woman was then. You know, or what the modern woman wanted to be, the modern girl wanted to be. And in a lot of ways also kind of the exact opposite of that too. It was also mostly just kind of like the ideal, I would argue, at least just from my own personal perspective, the ideal woman that Hitchcock had in his mind.
Yeah, very much so. And I mean, there's obviously baggage attached to that, but it is important to note, and I think it's interesting with the birds. For the majority of this film, she's driving the plot. Like she's making choices, and like, now, granted, the choices that she's making are, you know, constructed out of Hitchcock's not just ideal, but also kind of the way the structure of women in society was at the time. But it's interesting that she's more proactive than Rod Taylor to a certain extent.
Which I would argue, like, I know Tippi Hedren gets a little shit for the birds with just how like overdramatic she is. I would say that she was going off. I would say that gives her more cred in the fact that she's a professional and she was doing the job she was given, despite of a lot of the issues going on at the time. Again, I'm not going to try to get too far ahead.
Yeah.
But, I mean, you could argue she was overly dramatic, but Tippi Hedren was versatile. She knew she could be in any role, and she pushed herself even to breaking points, and I think she's just a total badass for it.
I agree. She's an ultimate badass, and this is her first film. That's the thing. This is her first film, and she obviously, like, within all the aspects that will be discussed, Hitchcock was her dramatic coach, and he did train her in a lot of the basics. And Hitchcock did say within the Francois Truffaut interviews that she didn't have to unlearn anything.
Yeah.
So there's that aspect of it, but she comes off strong in the movie in a way that, like, I think is impervious to criticism.
Well, one thing I always think that's kind of a shame is that Tippi Hedren doesn't get a lot of love for being one of the very first scream queens.
Yeah.
I mean, we talked about this on the podcast before, and you can still listen to the episode. It's episode 3, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Early on, we talked about how you see mostly women in horror being the focal point, whether it's they are the villain or they're the hero or, they are the motivational, element. They always play some sort of strong point. I mean, you have the ones that play you don't see it as much these days. You still kind of see it every now and then, but have the ones that are typecasted as like the bimbos that get killed off early, and that is literally how they are written. I am not trying to be offensive in any way. That is just how they are written.
Oh yeah, no,
it's how they are scribed.
That's not our fault. That's the '80s fault, or any other era.
But if you kind of like come back to it, and the examples I always love going to is Aliens. Sigourney Weaver in that movie she is also arguably a scream queen in her own right. But she's a badass in Aliens 1 and 2, and also in the other ones. I know the other ones get shit, but she still maintains that badass quality of hers. And same thing with Jamie Lee Curtis, and even Vera Farmiga now, Samara Weaving, one of the newest scream queens to come out of the Wet Work, and so Tippi Hedren kind of started that, moving plots along, being the focus, because it's the Birds wouldn't be the Birds without Tippi Hedren. Everybody always says the Birds wouldn't be Birds without average Hitchcock, although that's true, it also wouldn't be the same without Tippi being the protagonist.
Yeah, it's a coexisting mold within this because she's able to bring a strength to it. And, right from the get-go in the plot, like, she's instigating the conversation with Rod Taylor, who plays Mitch Brenner.
Yeah.
Because he comes into the shop and, he's his motivation for approaching somebody like Melody is because she's a socialite who's in the papers because of her prankster behavior.
Yeah.
But like she instigates, like the interaction within that discussion where she has to. I love this. She's like pretending she knows shit about birds.
Yeah.
To keep the conversation going.
And man, like that, her also being a prankster, like that also kind of went against a lot of what was expected of a woman back then too. I know earlier I mentioned, Hitchcock's version of a woman, but like, it's just also something that needs to be said is that her character is what women were considered, jobly duties back then, what they're supposed to be. She was kind of the opposite of that in the Birds too, and so like it was also kind of like this big turning point. And obviously I can't speak for all women, I'm a feminist from a male's perspective, so take from that what you will. But she definitely was what you didn't expect. She definitely went against the mold of the typical housewife, or being bred to be housewife.
It stands out. It stands out. It stands out more than other characters. I mean, I'd argue that it even like it goes beyond what we're able to do to a certain extent with Janet Leigh and Psycho, because Janet Leigh for the first 40 minutes of Psycho is instigating a lot of the plot. Like she's driving that. But I mean, Melanie Daniels gets further than Tippi Hedren to a certain point, and it's a fascinating watch. And the idea of her being a prankster, like I should have mentioned this prior, but before Rod Taylor comes in, she's trying to get a Mina bird.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
so like already we know she's gonna try to fuck with somebody using a talking bird.
Well, and women back then were expected to mind their manners, be respectful, speak when spoken to, don't speak over a man, yada yada yada. And then you got Melody coming in and just being a total like sarcastic butthole, what we all love to be. And I do mean that in the highest of compliments,
Yeah.
because like it's true, man. Like you don't, back then they didn't, that was considered rude of a woman to be like that. And now we look at it and we're just like, hell yeah.
Yeah, she's more active, and she's got a personality and a mind. And
Yeah,
and
she's not just a body.
Yeah, and what's fascinating is that there's a double-edged sword when it comes to Hitchcock's female characters because of different affectations that spread across the entire filmography. And I mean, up till this point, I've always felt that like Grace Kelly, for all the flack that she gets in Rear Window, she's very much the badass in that movie.
Yeah,
it's undeniable.
And The Birds is a great coming back to The Birds still.
Yeah.
This was bringing in a type of horror that we haven't seen up to this point. I talked about other creature features at the time being giant salamanders and whatnot. What we were looking at that was just really weird types of sci-fi horror.
Yeah.
Was it cool? Absolutely. Like there, somebody, whether it's because it's super corny, or just like really visually, interesting. Like somebody loves those movies for some reason.
Giant ants, man. Who doesn't love giant ants?
Like that's all I dreamed about becoming when I was a kid. One day, it's just a giant ant.
That's what Stan Lee dreamed about, but he dreamt smaller. Ant-Man.
Ant-Man. I mean, arguably, he does become Giant Man, so I would say.
God, it's my favorite part of Civil War. My favorite part of Civil War. I like Spider-Man in it, but my favorite part is when Paul Rudd becomes Giant Man and just goes, whoa!
But, yeah, man, I mean, what we were seeing in horror at the time is, okay, well, Hitchcock introduced us to the fact that we can touch on different types of horror, things that scare people. So what are other things in this area that scare people? What are other things that we can expand on? How far can we go? And you kind of start seeing the early stages of horror finally pushing that line. I mean, Evil Dead 2, which is always going to be my favorite movie no matter what, and Evil Dead really even is synonymous with that, with how far it pushes its themes.
Yeah.
Even just being a student film, like it still pushes its themes.
Yeah.
And so coming back to The Birds, having a female character play what goes against what was considered a female back then is pushing limits. Having creatures that do exist that we can see outside attack people and kill people.
Tangible reality becoming a threat.
And it was pushing limits. Like it was pushing what was considered okay or shocking back then.
Oh yeah.
And so, The Birds, again, getting a more nod to that was part of that early stage of seeing where can horror go. Because I mean, without that, who knows if we could get something as creative as Aliens. Or even like as something like Killer Clowns from Outer Space or The Blob. Or even Chucky. I don't think back then if you told the premise about Chucky to someone who just got out of The Birds that they would want to see that. They'd be terrified.
Hitch. Got an idea for you.
I mean, it wasn't unheard because they definitely had killer dolls, but you never seen it to the point of like.
Yeah, because even before Child's Play, you had the trilogy of terror with the Zimmy doll, and
But like you never saw like a doll like calling someone a bitch and then like stabbing them, trying to stab them in the face over and over.
I like the idea of Hitchcock getting a script like that and be like, no, I don't think they're ready. I thought they weren't ready for Psycho, but there's a lot of C words in here.
I don't like this.
Look, I mean, Brad Dourif isn't famous yet. I don't think it's gonna work. I don't know. I mean, thank you, young Don Mancini.
Right. Yeah. But
this is all unrealistic because Don Mancini was probably like 5. Like,
okay,
later, Mr. Hitchcock. But yeah, I mean, yeah, and she even when Rod Taylor or when Mitch calls out her lack of knowledge and whatnot, she doesn't back down or anything like that.
Yeah, no, she is definitely like, oh, fuck you.
And if anything, she ups the ante, so she loses her idea about the minor bird, which, lost opportunity. We could have had a talking bird sidekick throughout the entire birds going like, we're fucked.
Disney had it copyrighted at the time.
Oh, my gosh. Well, I mean,
they had the talking animal thing.
What's funny is after Psycho, Hitchcock, among the projects he was considering was a film that called The Blind Man, and it would have had James Stewart as a man who regains his sight by receiving the eyes of a dead man, and he starts seeing things through the eyes of a murderer all taking place at Disneyland. And apparently the only reason it isn't filmed is because Disney saw Psycho and he said, I don't want that freak filming in my park.
And then you got Disney like putting out traumatic shit left and right.
They're like, no, this is healthy for the kids.
Like,
scares them straight into not liking commies.
Right.
This this one is just a freak. Well, fuck you, Walt.
Right. Seriously. I mean, Disney's lying to themselves if they firmly believe they've never scarred kids with their own animated shows or whatever.
It's an interesting double standard. Like, I mean, it's understandable to a point, but like,
right.
you know,
like horror is still horror. You can. It doesn't matter how you tie it up.
Yeah.
If you have horror in it, it's a horror movie. Like pure and simple. Like, and I will argue that any day.
I'm with you because like there's many films that have the horror label. I think Joker's one of the more poignant horror movies of last year. Like other than like, I mean, it did not make my top 10, but Joker's a film that I've seen. I saw it once in the theater, and I was not as impressed as other people. But I was like, "But this is a good horror movie. It's like a comic book version of Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer."
Yeah.
But then I rewatched it, and I was like, "Okay, I'm even digging more into the horror aesthetic." So.
Yeah, I still haven't watched it yet, so I got to do it.
It's
unfortunately the way I see movies is always through streaming.
That's fair.
It's not that I don't like going to the theater. I actually do.
Mm-hmm.
But it comes back to two things. One, biggest thing, finances. Other thing is, because I even talked like on the podcast, is that I'm not a big fan of being in big crowds for a long time.
Yeah, I'm not feeling it.
And so like movie theaters aren't as big of a deal, but just like getting my mindset going into walking around people, dealing with people.
Yeah.
You know, is kind of can be a little trying every now and then. And I'm not trying to be a sympathy case, just more so.
I mean,
also majority like. When I can go see it, it's either my wife has to stay home and watch the kiddo, or the kiddo has to go with me. And I don't think my 5-year-old's ready for the Joker yet.
No, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood's fine though.
Yeah, totally okay.
That's totally fine. Only one real horror
I actually
scene.
read screenplays of Quentin Tarantino to her at night. Yeah, it's just
oh boy.
Yeah, we're about to do the Hateful Eight. Really excited for that
lovely,
one. Yeah,
lovely.
lots of heavy use of the word.
Gosh,
word on that
one.
halfway
point's going to be very interesting for her development. But so anyway, Mitch leaves the bird shop, and Melody decides, I'm going to play a prank on him. I'm going to bring these lovebirds over to him as a joke. She goes to his apartment, leaves the birds outside, and the worst neighbor imaginable, who just unveils every detail about his neighbor's life to this stranger.
Yeah.
Like it's the one thing in The Birds when I rewatch it every time I'm just like, fuck this guy. Like he's just giving her granted we need him to get her to Bodega Bay.
Yeah.
But like I don't want my neighbor telling people what I do on the weekend.
Yeah. like that's some sketchy shit,
Yeah, it's just like he's so like mad. I'm like, oh, he's not at home. He goes over to Bodega Bay every weekend.
I would also say probably the most unrealistic like representation of neighbors ever. I don't know. I mean about anyone else, but I don't even talk to any of my neighbors.
Yeah, exactly. It's I mean like there's that whole thing about like we left our doors unlocked when we were younger back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. I'm like, no, you didn't.
I mean,
I
can't say.
I love that notion, but no.
I'm sure there's some small towns in America, somewhere that did that. I mean, it's whatever. I mean, I don't know. I even if I was back then, I would still lock my door. I'm like, I don't trust these people.
Yeah, but at any rate, she decides to go to Bodega Bay. So she's driving, and like right off the bat, you're seeing beautiful Albert Whitlock matte paintings combined with the exteriors of Northern California, and a little puppet of the birds, swaying with the motion of the cars as a kind of cute little humor piece. She gets to Bodega Bay. She learns where the Brenner household is, and in the Brenner household is Mitch, his younger sister Kathy, and his mother Lydia, and Lydia played by Jessica Tandy, who is a Hitchcock mainstay amongst other things, but also married to Hume Cronin and If you've ever wanted to watch the most adorable and amazing married old couple on screen, watch Batteries Not Included. So,
Yeah.
and they're both in it, and they're amazing. But
I'm surprised I'm not the only one that knows that movie.
I got to it late. Brad Haig and James Hart from Real Nerds are the ones who got me into it.
Okay.
And they pitched it to me correctly, where they're just like, it's about old people who reminisce and are trying to live their lives. I'm like, oh, I'm sold. I love geezer exploitation. I love it. And then, I watch it and I'm just crying my fucking eyes out. Like it's
it's definitely.
And Mick Garris wrote the story for that, so I'm just like, yet another reason why Mick Garris is an unsung genius.
And I think that was another Disney movie too, wasn't it?
No, it's not. It was supposed to be an Amazing Stories episode,
Okay.
But then got reworked. And
I think it just
readapted.
has like a very Disney-like aesthetic from the outside.
It does. It very much does. But so she gets to Bodega Bay. She learns where they are. She decides to rent a boat. Completely lies about the fact that she doesn't know how to drive a boat and whatnot. But
right.
I gotta say, she for an amateur on a boat, she knows how to fucking cruise along the bay.
For as many things as like the Birds started off for great stuff in film and horror, it also started off some pretty weird stuff with like that exact scene where just like for some reason our hero just, even though openly admitting she doesn't know how to drive a boat, just all of a sudden can drive a boat.
Oh,
like,
we'll get into it. But I mean, there's logic issues in the Birds. There's logic issues in every movie.
Yeah.
And if anybody wants to give me shit about Us one more time, I'm going to go to bat and say, how many plot holes are there in Avengers Endgame?
Yeah.
But it's irrelevant. I mean, like, it's a movie. It's not real.
Well, it's the same thing that we preach on the podcast, man. Is like, love the movies that you love no matter what.
Yeah.
But at least be willing to criticize them for what they are.
Exactly.
Like, I still love the first Thor movie, but I will agree with every criticism against it because it's valid. Like, it's corny, it's, weirdly paced, all other, everything you've already heard about.
It's the most intriguing Kenneth Branagh movie in that regard.
Right. Like, I'm just a big proponent about, like, not blindly supporting something that is obviously bad.
Yeah.
Like, if you like something that's bad, fantastic, man. Like, bravo. But just, like, be willing to admit.
Yeah. Be able to be able to balance it in your mind. I mean,
Yeah,
I understand the problems with Us, but I'm able to appreciate it regardless of its blemishes. Same with The Shadow. Like, I shouldn't probably be loving The Shadow as much as I do, but I fucking do.
I kind of look at it as like, the metaphor I like to use is like, is microwaved lasagna.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Like, it takes a little work to get it warmed up. And get warmed up to the fact that you're going to eat it.
Right.
And it's not actual, in restaurant made lasagna, but it still tastes like lasagna.
Yeah.
You know what you're buying into. You're going to eat lasagna.
Yeah. That's how I feel about Tombstone pizzas. I know it's not really a pizza, but it's a pizza.
It tastes great.
Yeah.
And I'm getting what I paid for.
Yeah. So she drives the boat across the bay to get there. And it's important to note this is amongst the many Hitchcock tropes, mostly a silent sequence.
Yeah.
Hitchcock is very careful about using selective sound to create the near illusion of pure cinema, which is using zero sound and zero dialogue cards. And there's many instances of it, but like the scene is relatively silent. Like, even the electronic score is pretty much ceased up until the bird comes and attacks her.
Well, and this is I'm glad you bring that up because like that's a perfect example of like why I say he definitely has an art house aesthetic.
Yeah,
with the scenes he does. I mean, you don't really see those if you tried doing that today, it would be considered like an indie shot, something that you would see in an indie film.
Or devoid of good sound design.
People will be like, was there an editing issue?
Yeah.
Did they forget? Somebody...
It's so amazing you brought that up because I was thinking that today. I'm just like, man, you can't do what Hitchcock was doing in those small ways. Everybody would be like, what, are you unprofessional with your sound? Right. I'd be like, no, it was intentionally a fucking moron.
Yeah.
But, whatever. It's what it is. I mean, like... and obviously the art form develops and evolves, but it is something that we would consider an art house style today. And at the time, Hitchcock's just going off of where he started, which was silent film.
Yeah.
Like he makes his mark with something like The Lodger and really like learns how to tell that story with virtually nothing in the way of dialogue other than a few dialogue cards. And like the closer you can get to having no dialogue cards is when you're like achieving what his theory of pure cinema is.
Yeah.
And so that sequence in particular is very good at capturing your attention and creating a form of tension. I mean, she breaks right into their house, which, by the way, love Melanie Daniels. Don't break into people's houses.
That shouldn't be something that we have to touch on. But
yeah.
Hey, man.
Oh no. It's a mind. It's not a quibble of logic. It's more of just like, don't break into a fucking house. Like, but and also within that moment, she does meet the school teacher, who's sorry, I want to make sure I get her name right because it's a little hard. She plays Annie Hayworth, but her name is Suzanne Plachette. And Annie Hayworth has some history with Mitch, so
yeah.
And it's important to bring up at this point that Mitch, as a character within the Birds, is probably the most progressive male character in a Hitchcock movie.
Yeah, which
he
is really odd.
I thought of this last night. It is as if though Mitch is what Norman Bates would be if Norman Bates had a sane upbringing. Like,
yeah.
It's there's a bit of mother devotion to it, but it's a healthier boundary.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to be him dressing up as his mom anytime soon.
I mean, I have no opposition to Rod Taylor in drag, but
right. I mean, whatever you do in the bedroom, man, is your thing.
Yeah, exactly. He's just walking around in a dress. One day I'll play Winston Churchill in a weird movie for a guy who ran a video store. Like,
you wait, guy who doubts me.
Just you.
I'll show you.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to be working with some boy named Mike Myers and a young man named Michael Fassbender. But, and at the end of the day, he's a character that, he's much more tender. I mean, he's got his smarmy side, obviously, within the first couple of scenes he's in where he kind of throws out the screwball Cary Grant-esque role.
Yeah.
But he is, a very grounded and very realistic and primarily unoffensive male character, which I find utterly fascinating in the Burns each time I watch. He's not weak, but he's not toxically pushing his masculinity out there.
Right.
And the few times where he becomes traditional masculine are moments where it's necessary and not where it's unnecessary.
Well, you know what's weird about it, man? Because I know we already touched on it, so I'm not going to go back or real detail into it. But talking about, talked about like Tippi Hedren was kind of this starting place of strong women in horror.
Yeah.
And you see that with the men kind of going against their own gender roles, what was expected back then.
Exactly.
But what's weird about it is through the decades is that you see women become more and more like apparent in horror, more like important elements, where you see men kind of become this like loose, narrative. You either have, I guess the typecast they would usually be at is either the quiet soft guy, who just says quiet and soft, or the douchey jock.
Oh yeah, the jock asshole. Yeah.
But then when you see, and we reviewed this movie as well, and I'm going to probably do that a lot because we review a lot of movies, is As Above, So Below, where you see gender roles be swapped, early on, where it's the female is, the reckless one who's brave, who wants to go and, explore, these tombs in France. And then you have the male lead who is the more cautious, the sciencey, we shouldn't do this.
Yeah.
But both are very progressive, but they just switch their own gender roles. And so, like, coming back to the Birds, you see that as well.
Yeah.
And so, again, another mainstay of like what it started out is showing that, guys don't have to always be a huge masculine, like, I will save you, Jane, kind of thing. You can see them where just like, I will save you, Jane, if that's what you're cool with. I mean, it's fine if you're not. I'm just more here for comedic relief kind of thing. You know what I mean? It showed that that they don't have to be the same thing.
I love the idea of Hitchcock's Tarzan now.
Yeah.
It's totally cool, whatever.
I mean, if you want to swing around, you want to wear this? No, this is too revealing. I get it.
Alma, I don't think this is working. I mean, and that loincloth's ridiculous. I don't. Bye. But yeah. So he and it's we'll bring this up now because we want to get into the horror element of this a little bit too. But or the more traditional horror element. There's a film historian named Andrew Sarris. He passed away in 2012. He was very influential within the film criticism community, specifically also having duels of the pen with Pauline Kael. But Andrew Sarris was a big proponent of the auteur theory. And amongst the things he discussed with Hitchcock was the themes of the Birds. And this is a quote. You can find this on Wikipedia. It's from 1998. And I just wanted to kind of read this because I think it's very important. I mean, and granted, your interpretation of a film is what you make of it. It's a very subjective point of view for
Right.
every viewer, as my Real Nerds host Ryan likes to point out, and it's true. But this is Saris's take. The theme of the film, after all, is complacency, as the director has stated on innumerable occasions. When we first meet each of the major characters, their infinite capacity of self-absorption is emphasized. Tippi Hedren's bored socialite is addicted to elaborately time-consuming practical jokes. Rod Taylor's self-righteous lawyer flaunts his arrogant sensuality. Suzanne Plachette, his ex-fiancée, wallows in self-pity, and Jessica Tandy, his possessive mother, cringes from her fear of loneliness. With such complex and unsympathetic characters to contend with, that's one of the issues I take with his statement, but the audience begins to identify with the point of view of the birds, actually the inhuman point of view. Yeah. So obviously I have issues with that statement to a certain extent because I don't feel like they're unsympathetic. In fact, contrastly, we spend a lot of time with these characters to feel for them, so that when somebody like Suzanne Plachette's character Annie is killed, we feel bad because this is a woman who, came to Bodega Bay on the pretenses of a relationship with Mitch that doesn't work out. Yeah. So like we have a character what's interesting is that this is a very female dominated movie, and regardless of the politics of the time, it is interesting to note that the primary male character is Mitch and maybe a few background characters, but there are three leading women surrounding this one male character. Like, so it's, in a sense, it furthers your statement about this being like a very big proponent of what horror would become. Yeah. And it doesn't push the importance of Taylor to the side, and nor does it contradict or create any major problems for the female characters themselves. I mean, it takes a character like Tandy's character, who could be the Norma Bates of this universe, and breaks her down to an actual point. That scene where they're talking, she's in bed, is very, very poignant to like how Mitch grows up, how Kathy grows up, and how she was a mother. But I thought it was important to bring that up because at this point, Hedren is attacked by the first bird, and it's the small taste of horror he gives you up front while we're going to continue with this character drama. Mitch goes in, bandages her up. They kind of discuss like, okay, well, I was here to play a joke on you, and then we're starting to see the development of this relationship, which correlates with the bird attacks to a certain extent. And this will be brought up a little bit later too. They go back to the house. She meets Kathy, sweetest little girl in the world. She gets to know the entire family. Jessica Tandy meets her prior and, is suspicious of her because she is a little bit more of a possessive, domineering mother to an extent. Mm-hmm. I'd say less possessive and domineering than somebody like Norma, or at least the image of Norma. And gets to know everybody and kind of lies about knowing Annie prior so that she could stay at her house so she could be around Mitch. And we're seeing the development of this relationship, and Tippi Hedren is an outside force coming into Bodega Bay that upends the balance, not just with Mitch's relationships with other women in his life, but also the upsets the nature of Bodega Bay and its calmness. Yeah. Now, it's a correlation that can be interpreted multiple ways. I personally don't tend to connect the two too closely because you tread into too analytical of a water there, because it also goes in opposition of the fact that like nature's just striking back because nature's pissed off or tired of being taken for granted. But the birds is kind of a Rorschach where you can kind of apply a lot of different metaphor and meaning behind each of the different themes flowing through it.
Well, and I mean, really at its core, like the birds, like is a creature feature. Yeah. And the common theme in every creature feature movie is always nature striking back in some sort of way or taking on some sort of like supernatural or unnatural like form. So like, if we take something as extreme as like Lake Placid, we have a giant, crocodile lives in this lake who's eating bears and, people and just fucking shit up. And so like, great movie, and we're kind of terrified going murky waters. And so that's like, if that would be the most extreme of an example, when you come back to the birds being arguably compared to it, the most calm of it.
Yeah.
You keep seeing the same theme of nature striking back, or nature taking over, nature taking what it feels is its rightful place amongst the food chain.
Yeah.
And so it's, just kind of like everything we're touching on is just birds. They're supposed to be the evolved form of like dinosaurs. So how do we make that terrifying?
Yeah.
How do we make that, something that people are scared of? And then just kind of touching on, like, for example, with what you said of the first bird attacking, what he did at that point was not just scare you. He kind of put the seed in your head of this could happen.
Yeah.
This can happen where a bird will attack you.
That's the most logical attack in the movie.
Yeah.
Like, from a realistic standpoint.
Yeah.
Bird can hit you over the head.
Like, you can joke about it, but, like, coming back to earlier what I was talking about with, like, videos of dudes being chased by geese, like, any gruff guy would be like, oh, guess I'm just going to have dinner early that night. Like, that dude's probably going to, like, scream like a girl.
Yeah.
and I know no shot to any women, just like, but you get what I mean, like high-pitched scream.
Yeah.
If he gets chased by, like, little Robin.
Yeah. No, it's a situation where you, with this kind of creature feature, it is creating a tangible reality and something that, when fully blossomed, is unrealistic.
Yeah.
In the way it's orchestrated specifically in the birds, because the coordination of the attack by these birds is utterly fascinating, and it's planned meticulously by Hitchcock within the confines of, like, possible error in the special effects and the wrangling of these birds.
Right.
Which it should be pointed out that these birds, like, there's a combination of different things. There's matte shots and sodium shots of these birds. There's also actual birds on set. A lot of things that were planned for these initial shots of the birds, like, such as them going through the chimney into the house. Only so much of that was able to be practical within the set.
Yeah.
And then other elements had to be used with the sodium process, so it's kind of like an early form of green screen acting in that respect.
Yeah.
So within all of this, we've got a bird attack that happens prior, and nothing really happens for a little bit within that respect other than character development, which is, a lovely prospect for these characters. She goes to stay with Annie. Bird hits the door. It's not dark out. Bird doesn't have a loss of direction. The full moon out, and that's what she points out. And we move along from that point to the birthday party.
Yeah.
And where we get, and what's funny about the birds is that as far back as the beginning of this podcast, it has been the primary first Hitchcock film you see for a lot of people. It certainly was for me. It has been for a lot of other people, because the idea of a bird attacking you is terrifying. It's absolutely nuts. I hated peacocks when I was a kid.
Right.
I absolutely hated them. I never liked going to the zoo for that reason. I was scared shitless of these plumage-ridden birds. Because they're aggressive. They are aggressive birds.
When you're that fabulous, you got to make up for it with being overly offensive.
Yeah, it turns out they weren't, like, trying to attack me. They were just trying to show off their sexiness. And I agree, whatever. But anyway, when you get to that birthday party, the relationship between Melanie and Mitch is very much becoming a lot more clear and blossoming. And within that blossoming, the biggest attack to date, more coordinated attack, comes at this birthday party, which is in a terrifying moment in a series of montage with different shots of birds running into balloons and, like, tackling the children to the ground, or, like, impacting them to the point where they hit the ground.
Well, and what's so cool about this shot and just everything leading up to it is that we're witnessing two things happen, where it's, one, we're now witnessing a theme in horror where the terror on itself is getting increasingly what is perceived by the protagonist worse, but is escalating throughout the movie. Where prior to this, when you had horror in anything, it was always kind of the same thing in some sort of way. So, like, for example, I'll go back to those movies that we're talking about with the giant salamander, with the giant ants.
Yeah.
it would always just be it's a giant salamander or a giant ant just attacking the same or similar way. It never really escalated on itself other than, becoming maybe it attacks a city or whatever. Or kills, a little more people. But it still stayed within its same wheelhouse, its same context. Whereas you see one bird attack one person to a whole birthday party of birds not just attacking adults, but also something you don't really see too much of, attacking kids too.
Yeah.
Because the kind of thought was, kids are off limit kind of thing. And
nope, not for...
And Hitchcock's like, fuck that, they're going down too.
No. We're going to torture them. I'm sorry we have to. I know. I'm a jerk.
Well, because, and you got to think about it, man. Like, the American birthday, everybody has in the mind it's always in the backyard. There's maybe a clown or, bounce house or whatever. And it's supposed to be, like, the safe spot. Maybe there's, like, a little bit of family drama. But other than that, like, you never really see... You think of something terrible happening like that because there's all these people in this one space. Everybody can group together to protect these kids.
Exactly.
And then once you add an element where they can't do that, trying to fight off swarm of birds, you kind of realize holy shit, nothing's safe.
He does upset the traditional American birthday party, as you pointed out.
Yeah.
Yes, that's exactly it. And he brings... It's something that he started with in Shadow of a Doubt and then kind of comes full circle into other films, specifically this. He's upending the complacent American nature.
Well, I mean, if you look at it, even just going back to Psycho, every killing that happens in that movie is usually via one person. You don't really see him killing a group of people.
No.
And so the thought there is okay, well, this guy has to kill one-on-one. He can be overpowered. And then, that's the only place terror can go. And then Hitchcock's like, hell no.
No. You don't know what I'm fucking capable of. No, you thought the one man with the butcher knife was something? Get ready for this shit.
Imagine birds with butcher knives. And they had to
watch this shit.
They had to talk Alfred out of that scene. We can have the birds attack. We just can't have them holding knives. Can they wear dresses?
Look, Roger the Raven. I understand that the knives would help you get into character, but I've got something breathing down my neck. It's called Lou Wasserman, and he's pissed. So you got to get rid of the knives. I know we spent a whole day filming with you, practicing your knife skills.
There's all these small little knives they made specifically for each bird. Did the guy missed out on his kid's birthday to make them for this one shot? Finds out they're not being used. He's like, "Fuck it."
Look, I know there was a scene, Roger, where you were.
Fuck you, Hitchcock. Fuck, you don't even know, man.
You know where I've been.
You don't know what went into this, man.
You don't know what kind of nefts I've flown into.
My blisters have blisters.
What is you guys giving you the bird? I'm gonna be the bird that I give you when I kick your ass.
That's actually how it started. He actually flipped. He was so angry he flipped Hitchcock off.
Yeah,
he's like, here's your bird. And now that's that. Now it's called a bird. I'm in shock. I had no idea. Who thought they were going to be that pissed off? I really hope I haven't upset their union. And that's the thing. You have a bunch of birds converging. And a lot of these are trained birds. Run by the one animal trainer, and there was a lot of Humane Society stuff on set and whatnot to take care of these birds. Which was really, I mean, which was good and also interesting because that's when still animal rights in movies were still not a heavily influenced thing.
Yeah, I think it's primarily because of just it probably was a logistics thing for not just animal safety but also human safety because of the nature of what the birds are supposed to do in those scenes. And you have some birds are being held by their legs for certain shots. Some people are, or some birds are, kind of have their beaks shut or something like that. Or there's a limit where there's a wire where they can't fly beyond a certain distance.
Right.
So it's an interesting wrangling on production scale.
Right.
So the birthday party ends though, and we go back to the house, and then the attack becomes insular with a bunch of strawberry finches coming through the chimney. And this is where the combination of actual birds on set works for one or two shots but doesn't work for the entirety of it. And so the sodium process has to come in to lay in that effect of the birds swarming around them.
Yeah.
The bird attack subsides. Sheriff comes in and goes I don't know, it doesn't seem like that's possible.
Also, remember how I told you this was also the movie that also brought in like weird logical issues that don't make sense?
Yeah.
It also brought in the dumb police.
Oh yeah.
I mean, if you listen to the podcast, you know we hate it whenever there's a horror movie that just has stupid cops.
Yeah.
Like
culmination, please, being Halloween 5, where you have two of the dorkiest cops imaginable.
Like Andy Griffith's show type of like cop, just like, well, I reckon I never heard of a bird doing that, and you have like a group of people all saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, well, maybe you're all on drugs. Saying it to like the 6-year-old.
Actually, I lied. You know what the culmination point of that is? Tammy and the T-Rex.
Yeah, Tammy and the T-Rex.
The cops and Tammy. I just saw it for the first time this week. Tammy and the T-Rex has some of the most inept, dumb but hilarious cops imaginable.
I mean, obviously for something like that, like that's more acceptable. But when it's like, I'm trying to think of one.
Last House on the Left has some really dumb cops.
Yeah,
the original one.
Example. Yeah, there's some really stupid cops back then. I mean, one could argue that's how it was treated back then with cops, you know, in like the 70s and 80s, of being like, oh, them kids, kind of like, oh, I'm sure it's just some roughhousing.
Yeah.
You know, and they never took that shit serious. So one could argue that was just accurate for the time. But when they're just like overtly dumb, and they're just like, again, like a group of people all saying the same thing, and they're just like, oh, y'all having a joke. Like,
no, I'm in denial land.
Like, oh, thanks, Dick.
Yeah, my favorite river is denial. So, you know, like, I don't understand. I think you're all just, like, huffing paint.
You all must be a bunch of Satanists or something.
Yeah, exactly. I'm the only one who's saved, so, in this town, so that may explain it.
I was baptized. I didn't get attacked by birds.
This is what happens when you follow Lutheran values. You and the Unitarians, you all got it fucking wrong.
I told you your pranks would catch back up to you. Just like,
yeah.
All right.
But so the cop goes away, whatever. Nobody really believes him and whatnot. The next morning, Lydia goes to the Fawcett farm.
Yeah.
And there she finds Farmer Fawcett dead after having had his eyes pecked out. Another sequence that has been replicated to this day to a certain extent, whether it's the actual effect, which his eyes being poked out is a combination of like makeup effect, but also matte painting with Albert Whitlock combining with the sodium process, where detail was added to make the emptiness of the eyes more profound,
which is also like a very early stage of like gore in horror movies too. Because like again back to Psycho, he did a cutaway shot to basically show that she was being stabbed to death, but to show that like even just somebody's missing an eye, like it's huge. I mean, it's back then, like, can you imagine being one of the people and just being like, oh, they're not going to show this scene, and then like actually seeing that and you're like, oh my god,
you don't know what I'm capable of, motherfucker. Look at that shit.
Like,
look at that shit. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna start from a wide. I'm gonna cut to a medium and then cut to an extreme close up.
And even just in horror, just like gory movies in general, like there, whenever you watch a gory film, they'll always like go for a certain limb, and those limbs will decide the shot of how intense it is and if they're going to show the whole thing.
Yeah.
And the eyes are always one of the most sensitive places. I mean, if you look at The Green Inferno, you know, if you've ever seen that movie, there's a point where one of the guys gets his eyes like just skewered out while he's alive, and it shows the whole thing. And like it's just so uncomfortable, and you're just like, oh my god.
Yeah.
I mean, shout out to Eli Roth. I love that dude.
Oh, dude.
But like the fact that something similar to that was shot way back, you know, in The Birds. I mean, obviously not as, you know, raw and intense, but like still similar to that effect. You're just, the fact that he got away with it is just kind of astounding.
It's funny you bring up Eli Roth in that respect, because there are featurettes in earlier DVD releases of Hitchcock films. I think the Psycho one's most profound, where you have a lot of different directors talking about what influences them and how those influences of Hitchcock can be seen in their films. And Eli Roth has some of the most prominent examples of the most recent generation, where, like, I mean, Hostel follows a lot of the Psycho mold and whatnot, but you also just have, you know, the pecking out of the eyes and other elements like that are profound in movies that expand to today. That pecking scene in particular, or the result of it, I guess we should say, because Farmer Fawcett's already had his attack.
Yeah.
The one thought that I had was that The Mummy, 1999's The Mummy, when
the Brendan Fraser one?
Yeah, it's funny because Stephen Sommers manages to cram 2 Hitchcock references into one shot, because there's a shot where Rachel Weisz goes up to one of the guys, and he's got his back to the camera, and it's kind of like the Psycho shot with going up to Mrs. Bates in the fruit cellar.
Yeah.
And then he turns, and not only is he fucked up like Mrs. Bates is, we're dead, but he's got his eyes pecked out and his tongue pucked out from The Mummy. So he was able to combine a Psycho and Birds reference into one basic shot.
Right.
The CGI doesn't really hold up with The Mummy, but some of it does. But that particular shot is just like, wow, it's interesting. That eyes being gouged out of you is still effective to this day.
Which, I will say a side note, since we are able to give a lot of love to Keanu Reeves, I do think Brendan Fraser needs that same love.
Absolutely.
And I miss Brendan Fraser. I actually watched Blast from the Past last night. And I'll tell you, man, watching that movie high is definitely weird. But it was great because it's Brendan Fraser, man. And I just... we demanded the success of Keanu Reeves to come back, and so now I think we need to do the same Brendan Fraser, because he was terribly blacklisted from Hollywood. He did not deserve it.
Yeah, there's it touches on a lot of stuff that we'll probably dive into, but there's a lot of like chicanery going on with his career, and
I just miss Brendan Fraser.
I do
man.
too. I want something fun out of him again, because I think he can do it beautifully. Like, I mean, I don't really love Tomb of the Dragon Emperor that much because
but if you take that aside, like Mummy 1 and 2 are solid purely because of Brendan Fraser.
Yeah,
and then one of my favorite from him that no one ever talks about is Bedazzled.
Bedazzled's it's a good remake too.
Well, and normally, like, I'm against rom-coms, and I'm not a big fan of it, but the reason I love it is because Brendan Fraser was a good example of a non-toxic male.
Yeah,
like it showed that it just him trying to be an overtly masculine dude was not his thing.
Yeah,
he and that was okay.
Yeah,
like, he still found the love of his life at the end of the movie.
Yeah,
and I just thought that was awesome because Brendan Fraser is he's a versatile actor. I love the shit out of that guy.
He's a cool Canadian too. So there,
I can forgive him for Furry Vengeance and Tomb of the Dragon.
I'll watch him play around with a bunch of weird animals. Like, it's awesome, man. Like, he's the best part of Encino Man, and Encino Man's full of problems. Airhead's another great example.
Yeah, Brendan Fraser, man. Like, the dude is a national treasure that we do not appreciate enough.
Bring back Brendan.
Bring back Brendan. Hashtag.
Hashtag BBB. So the attack in the house is over. The Fawcett farm happens, and we go back, and Lydia's in a state of shock. Things are not going well for anybody in this whole film, and amidst that, Melanie ends up connecting with Lydia. Lydia explains a little bit more of her parenting history, and where the issues from. It's not just how Mitch turns out, but also how Kathy reacts to her. Like, Kathy's been chatty with Melanie the entire time because, like, it's like a big sister affectation, or like a different relationship. Like, and it's, the way you look up to some adults that aren't your parents or anything like that.
Right.
By the way, Kathy also says, like, I know all about that democracy jazz in an earlier scene. And I'm just like, oh boy, I love it when you can break down civics to just jazz.
Democracy jazz.
Yeah, exactly.
Name my next ska band.
Yeah, exactly. Like, that Watergate bebop, man, that was terrible. But so anyway, so we get a little bit more out of Lydia, and then it kind of fully forms these female characters. And Melanie offers to pick up Kathy from the school. And arguably, we get one of the most terrifying scenes in the film, obviously amidst a sea of other terrifying moments. And this scene involves the schoolhouse and a primarily silent sequence from start to end. Where she goes to the school, she sees that the children are still learning, and they're singing this, they're singing this nursery rhyme, kind of like this old song, which by the way, the screenwriter,
which isn't terrifying at all.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's oh god, it's terrible. That's unsettling because it's also the only scene where you have any music in this movie.
One could argue at that point, the birds are the hero destroying this cult village. Town.
And it's a Rissel di Rossidi.
Yeah.
And what's funny is that Evan Hunter put it in there, but there's not enough lyrics to fill the entire scene, so he wrote additional stanzas for the film. And in order for it to be used in the film, he had to join ASCAP. So until the day Evan Hunter, to the day when he was doing that documentary on the birds, and eventually to his passing in 2005, he's still getting ASCAP royalties for that one nursery rhyme in the birds. That's God. Talk about a screenwriter who like cleaned up the royalty department. But that sequence kind of starts off. We get to see Hitchcock build the tension. You see a shot of a crow on the jungle gym, and it cuts back to Melanie, and she's smoking, and you hold on the shot until it's almost unbearable, and then you cut away to a shot of a couple other birds flying, and then suddenly that entire jungle gym is covered with crows, who by aviary standards are intelligent birds, and so it's easier to train them amongst all the other birds they were working with.
Yeah.
She goes into the schoolhouse, says like, "Don't go out the side door. We've got to do a fire drill." Which, by the way, if there's only one logic issue or like whatever that I had with it, Annie tells the kids to exit in a quiet and orderly fashion to a certain point before they start running, and it would be the hotel before they start running. The shot cuts to it has them exiting the schoolhouse, cuts back to the birds, and you have a couple beats.
Yeah.
And then you hear the starting of running, and then the birds starting to attack. They're not anywhere near anywhere other than the schoolhouse when they start running.
Yeah, right.
So the kids didn't listen to the instructions.
I mean,
I don't care either, but
argument's sake, if a shit ton of birds are gonna, attack me, that's the exact moment I would throw orderly fashion out the window.
Yeah, it's just like, fuck you, ma'am.
I'm only 5. I'm still young.
And also keep in mind, these are also kids. They're unpredictable because, they are not like other normal children. Like when Annie tells them that they have to leave school, they all say in unison, "Leave school!" Teacher tells me we gotta be like, we're gonna leave school for the day, but won't tell me the reason. Be like, all I heard was leave school, and I'm totally down for this. Like, bye, so long, schoolhouse. But they start running down, and it's a very highly technical scene with the birds attacking. Has a horrifying moment with one of Kathy's friends who is plummeted down to the ground, and she's being pecked at by the birds, and she yells out, "Kathy, Kathy!"
Yeah,
and it's unnerving. They get into the car. They get to safety. Annie is able to take Kathy and Kathy's friend and try to get them to safety after the attack subsided. Tippi Hedren and Rod Taylor go to the diner, and the diner is where a lot of it's a lot of exposition while not explaining anything. So it's just a conversation to kind of build up these attacks, how it could be unrealistic, and how it's just, regardless of it being unrealistic, it's happening. You have a sea of characters amidst like a terrified mother who doesn't want her children to hear this conversation. You have a drunk in the corner going, "It's the end of the world," which, God bless, any drunken Irishman in the background of a scene just going like, "Fuck you, we're all gonna die." And
I told you.
Yeah.
I told you.
And then you have Mrs. Bundy, the ornithologist, played by Ethel Griffiths, who really is like, she's kind of like the Quentin Tarantino of this movie, where she just brings in her expertise out of nowhere.
Yeah.
But she's also the one that, like, she's there to set up that she's wrong, essentially, because like everything she's saying, while it sounds logical, has gone against everything we've seen thus far. So it's that's that thing of like, we know more than some of the characters do, which works in a dramatic and tension fueled way. It then leads to all out chaos in the town.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about special effects shots and special effects filmmaking before CGI. The Birds is up there as like a peak of innovation.
Yeah.
These birds set gas stations on fire. They scare the shit out of horses. And there's
probably the most punk rock birds ever.
Oh god, yeah, they're just like metal.
It's like Motorhead playing in the background. I mean, before Motorhead was Motorhead. It's the Ace of Space.
Somebody should remake. Somebody should re-edit that scene and overlay Motorhead.
There's just like just like an actual like few birds that are banned playing that song.
Oh yeah,
it's the call of space.
It's like it's the equivalent. It's the bird equivalent of in Mad Max Fury Road, where you have that guy on the guitar on top of the car.
There's just like flames coming out of the guitar. It's like nuts.
Death to humanity.
They're just like doing double beats, blast beats. So really, it just becomes a whole metal music video.
Oh yeah, exactly. No, Alma, trust me. I know that they're expecting the horror movie. What they're not going to expect is a rock musical in the middle.
First,
of
you
it.
had to make these knives. Now you're making these instruments. Now we're even not going to use these. Why do I keep coming back, Alfred?
Hitch, why are you insisting on this? Trust me. It's gonna work.
This is the weirdest tobacco I've ever had. It's making me think weird things.
Alma, this tobacco tastes just lovely.
It's
fucking
fantastic.
lovely. Just, I know I ate 5 meals earlier when I wasn't smoking this, but now I want 10 more.
Alfred, I don't think you remembered that you ate one of the birds.
Oh, poor fellow.
That explains the feathers.
That's gonna be.
He just
spits them out.
Just
we gotta shut this production down for a couple of days and figure out what the fuck is going on.
So you bring me on your show, man, and I bring it to the point where Alfred Hitchcock's eating his own, birds.
Trust me, I'm glad that we could get him to the insanity point. Because so far he's been pretty calm with his explicitness. The birds is where he decides to say, fuck it.
Yeah, the special effects, man.
It's incredible, and like that phone booth sequence is still unnerving. That's the shot that got me to even watch this movie. Because the Alfred Hitchcock collection was advertised in the Mummy VHS.
Yeah.
And they showed that shot, and that was the shot that stood out to me. And that's why I was just like, I want to watch this bird movie.
Yeah. Right.
And it still works, and we should talk about it at this point because it is a very poignant moment in this. So
yeah, this is where I take issues with Hitchcock overall, man.
Okay, so his possessive and obsessive nature over women.
Yeah, especially Tippy.
Yes, especially Tippy.
And if you I'll let you.
Oh, go right ahead. Yeah.
But like, even if you look at Tippy, like he kind of had this obsessive nature with a lot of people that had the same, or a lot of women that had the same features that Tippy had too.
Yeah,
blonde, blue-eyed. For the most part.
Yes, exactly. Grace Kelly being one where he did not put through the things that he put Tippy through. The bottom line is it's unacceptable behavior out of our subject for this entire series.
Well, man, and if coming back to like how I said like Kubrick and Hitchcock, were similar in the ways they both also treated their actresses in the same way.
Yeah,
so,
Kubrick and Shelley Duvall is a primary example.
If you watch or listen to any of the interviews that poor Shelley Duvall, like she was so beautiful back in the day, and you can just see like everything that she went through has just taken a toll over her over the years. And she's so amazing of an actress, and if you see her talk about that movie, she does not have it in any high regards. Like she hates it. Yeah. Like one could say that she despises it for the most part. And Tippi Hedren, the same thing with the birds.
Yeah. Now Tippi Hedren's interviews for the birds since the making of that film in Marnie, she is very, she praises Hitchcock. But those interviews also tend to ignore probably definitely other elements to this whole story.
Real quick, real quick about my comment about Shelley Duvall.
Yeah,
I want to make a point that I'm not saying that Shelley Duvall is anything but beautiful. Like she's she's not attractive.
No,
I was more so just meaning just like the light that she once had.
Yeah, it's the idea of
you can see it's been a bit depleted. But what you're talking about. Yeah, like in that scene, so she was all cut up, she was bleeding, like she had serious like injuries that required stitches. Because there was even a point where like he attached a bird to her face, to get that terror out of her, and it was literally clawing. Like in the scenes in the movie, and it's supposed to be portrayed as fake, but it's legit. Like it is a real scene where he attached a bird to her face, so like coming back to also like when animal rights weren't really, considered, you feel so sorry for her because that was definitely when Hollywood was also not that it's not now, but when it's definitely a boys' club.
Yeah, and the bottom line is you're dealing with a subject that, we've had a lot of issues come to light within the last 2 to 3 years, but these are eternal issues that have been happening in the history of Hollywood, and they're unacceptable under any circumstances. And there's other people who make statements that these are all allegations and whatever, but the bottom line is that like there's more than enough evidence to suggest that Alfred Hitchcock is more than guilty of these actions. And at the end of the day, we are talking about the cinematic impact of Alfred Hitchcock, but this is something that I'm not going to shy away from. I mean, when we get into Marnie at a later episode, the division of art and real life becomes very messy, because the two are intertwining too uncomfortably. There's other directors who are, have been called out for this, like Bertolucci, the director of Last Tango in Paris, did similar pushing his actors to an edge point in very uncomfortable ways. And in inexcusable ways. So when you watch the scene with Tippy in the phone booth, there's genuine terror once you know some of the stories, regardless of how they're presented. Just the bottom line is that there's an element of actual danger, and an element that doesn't exist on the practical level in regards to like people use CGI for stuff like that now, but whatnot. But when you add this with the terror of somebody who's acting like Hitchcock was acting, it's unsettling.
Well, what's so shameful about it, man, is that, and one of the smudges on the history of horror in general, is that kind of made it okay to do things with animals like that. Yeah. In horror, at least, and obviously some other bigger pictures, but like Cannibal Holocaust, for example, whatever. Obviously the people didn't actually die. If you don't know that already, they were alive.
What?
Yeah.
Matt, I saw the movie, but they were not dead.
Sadly, though, man, it's the turtles in that movie were actual turtles, and they were killed on camera, and so, but that was okay. Like that was considered like, obviously, and I'm just speaking on a general, like, there obviously are people that are just like, oh, that's fucked up when that came out back then, like that's not okay, but because Alfred Hitchcock was able, nobody stopped Alfred from attaching a bird to Tippi Hedren's face.
Right.
It kind of made it like, well, if Alfred could do it, why can't I?
Right.
Kind of thing. And I'm not saying that was the, general inspiration behind the turtle killings.
Yeah.
But it kind of set that precedent.
Yeah, and again, this is a bad situation all around, but it is, and we need to address it because it's there. It's not. There's no such thing as ignoring a white elephant in the room when it comes to the behind the scenes stories in film. And if it comes up further in the conversation, we deal with it appropriately.
Yeah.
Back to the main plot of the film. Chaos has reigned. Horses are flying around. There's a God's eye view of the birds going, "Fuck you, humanity," and and that shot in particular was shot like it's a process shot where all but a certain section is cut out.
Yeah,
and they shot it at the parking lot in Universal, and they had to get it right the first time because it's ingrained in the negative, and so that shot is composed of several different layers to create that effect, And it's the natural evolution of the special effects techniques that they don't get their start in this, but like are exemplified by stuff like The Invisible Man from 1933 with Claude Rains.
Yeah,
where that's how we create an invisible effect that's able to carry out throughout an entire picture. And so this is similar filmmaking technique that has evolved beyond that point thanks to people like Abba Works and the Disney Imagineer Works. Haha. Rent Disney Plus, guys. I don't fucking know. I don't have it yet. I haven't watched Mandalorian. I'm sorry. So anyway, we're back to the diner. We get back to the diner. They have just endured this massive attack.
Yeah.
And the mother, who was terrified of her children hearing all this scary stuff, calls out what I would consider like one of the more traditional horror tropes in the film, which is this like, none of this happened until you showed up into town.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The whole like, demonizing of the outsider kind of deal.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, that is huge. That is like you see that theme take on so many different forms too. Whether it is something as big as like a guy from out of town coming in, or even like somebody entering somebody's life and shit happening. So, for a good example is just, I mean, there's multiples of them, but like the traditional one you would see is like some sort of supernatural being or force, who was only rumored to exist, is suddenly coming into existence, and it's only happening because, it started with this person.
Yeah.
And then everybody starts to blame this person, saying that they are involved somehow.
Yeah.
And so as a viewer, you look at that and you're like, that's insane. Like obviously they wouldn't do that. But then if you take a second, you go into the mindset of the person who's accusing them. I mean, you want to answer this for why your kid's now dead.
Yeah.
And if you could bring it back to the one person who should also be dead but isn't, you're going to kind of wonder why.
You have something like Frankenstein. James Whale's Frankenstein from 31 is like a very early example of that from the more pop culture modern aesthetic.
Yeah.
And David J. Scull, who is a wonderful writer, you should read The Monster Show. It's an amazing book about the early years of horror. He points out like it's a traditional mob scene, and in this particular instance, it's a mob that's very isolated and condensed into this diner. And if you notice, like everybody in that shot is women. So again, it's another predominantly female-driven moment, with only Rod Taylor as Mitch present in that moment as the male influence, and it kind of directs to like, how does this affect not just Melanie but Mitch as well. So it's covering a lot of different ground in a very fascinating way. So they leave the diner. They are backtracking past the school towards Annie's house, and they find Annie dead. Yeah. They're being very quiet. Again, like at this point, all sudden movements and motions of the humans in this film become very bird-like. Because they start acting the way some birds do around humans in order to avoid being startled or surprised or killed. Yeah. So they find Annie dead. Terrifying reaction from Tippy, and Annie's fucking dead. Like her it's a weird shot. Her foot is caught in between like the slit of the stair of the step and the stairs. Yeah. So it's like she tripped and like fucking toppled over. Yeah. And then you find Kathy in the house. And it's revealed by Kathy in a hysterical crying moment that, Annie, we were taking back my friend, and then the birds started coming, and Annie pushed me into the house, and so it was Annie sacrificed herself to save Kathy. So they get back to the Brenner house, and they start boarding up the windows and everything where the birds could get in.
And like setting up for like the final stand.
Which it should be pointed out, if we want to get back into the logic issues, when we get further into that scene, when they start attacking, it's unclear as to whether or not the window that the birds are coming through is a place that they forgot to board up, or the birds like just so strong at this point that they're
just
pushing
like
through.
Kool-Aid Manning it through the wall.
Yeah.
Like,
oh yeah. And then, so I know the knives didn't work. I know that the rock opera wasn't going to work either, but I have this vision. I mean, you call me crazy, but a man made of liquid beverage pushing through a door. Now, I mean, obviously we don't have the technology to make a Kool-Aid man.
There was a guy who actually made his own fruit punch, and he's like, if only I could market this somehow. And this happens to be working on that crew.
I know, property destruction.
Like, oh. He hears this pitch, and he's just like, Alfred, that's a terrible idea. Write this down.
No, it will not work, Al. Hitch, it's not going to work. Hitch, it's not going to work. Write this fucking shit down.
Millions.
We're going to make so much money, and we're going to get made fun of by some guy from Rhode Island. And it's going to be like a running gag on this long-running TV show that was once canceled. But
yeah, I like that. That's the tagline. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That's where it comes from. Alfred Hitchcock was stoned and said, "Oh yeah." But regardless of the logic issue, it's still a terrifying moment because everything's dropping into silence.
Yeah.
And then suddenly the sound starts building up again. We have that soundtrack, that electronic soundtrack, slowly building up to a huge, insane attack where, like the birds are coming through the windows. He ties off the window and the shutter door with a lamp cord.
Yeah.
And then he comes through the door where the birds are pecking through the door.
And the music is just like really important to the scene as well. I mean, always bringing it back to horror, like music is always going to matter. It's always going to set the mood for the type of scare that you're getting.
Yeah.
And Alfred Hitchcock definitely set that standard of like, the ear piercing type of music. And just even on a scientific point, our ears can only handle a certain amount of level of sound, and if that just gets peaked really fast, it'll just send a reaction to our brain and make us jump. That's why when you go to haunted houses, they slam doors and whatnot, like they do those loud noises because it tricks your brain.
It's a natural chemical reaction.
Exactly. And so he with Psycho and whatnot. I'm not going to do the whole high pitched thing. I don't want to ruin everybody's ears.
No, don't do it.
Coming back to the scene you're talking about, like the sound is important. Like it's putting your body like on nerves. Like,
it's drawing, and especially since this particular score is non-traditional and mainly an organic or an attempt at an organic sound of birds and stuff. It's operating on the same level as music, where it has cues and moments to accentuate itself. You have these birds coming through the door, which, like the way they're coming in, like when I've seen this film multiple times, and this is the first time last night rewatching it where I was just going like, here's Johnny, here's Johnny, here's Johnny, because they keep coming through just like Jack Nicholson. So I'm just imagining a bunch of tiny Jack Nicholson birds coming through the fucking door.
Well, and this is that like point where it's like you got to kind of like leave the logic behind, because the thing is, we're watching a movie.
Yeah,
we're watching a fictional movie where it's supposed to be tangible.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there's a type of bird that can like do that, just like barrel through. And I guess, you could even argue attacking the same weak spot over and over eventually would give way. But I mean, at some point you just got to accept that this is the movie that we're watching.
Exactly, and I find no issue with it logic wise. I mean, like we're already seeing birds attack shit and setting fire to gas stations. At this point, I'm believing these birds can do anything, which makes the logic even more sound when that attack subsides. Melanie goes up the stairs when all the lights have been gone out and goes up toward the attic to hear what the fluttering is all about. And the birds have gotten through the roof, and that's how they have been able to infiltrate the top of the house. Now, should point out this scene where she's in the top attic is another scene where Tippi Hedren suffers abuse at the hands of Hitchcock's technique, but also just his actions. Period. She was told mechanical birds would be of use.
And this is sorry, because I did jump ahead a little earlier.
No, go right ahead.
Criticism, but this is the exact scene I was talking about.
Yeah, and this is the moment where, she's told like the day of the filming that it's, they've got to use live birds because the mechanical birds won't work, but it's already been constructed that there's guidelines and limits for where the birds can go, like different wiring fences. So obviously this was already in Hitchcock's head, and it comes into the discussion of what is an appropriate behavior from a director to get the emotion out of their actors, and when is it just straight up abuse? Yeah,
and we've even talked about this too on our subject of snuff films, just because snuff films are if you're not a horror veteran or you're even a horror fan in any way, like snuff films do get heavily attached to horror in general. And we talked about it in order to try to separate it and show where that line is. But they have to have these talks. Now in like modern film, like they definitely like there's rights you have to be aware of. There's boundaries you have to be aware of. But back then it was just such a wild west of it that you could as it happened lie about.
Different.
And I guess maybe I'm using lie from my own opinion. Lie about mechanical birds being used.
Yeah, exactly. That's again like. It's a situation that's terrifying, and this is a sequence that took 5 days to shoot. So there's 5 days of stuff. Now, from the technical level, 5 days makes sense, but it's still a situation where that's 5 days of torture being inflicted upon her. And there's a story in the documentary that's attached to the Blu-ray that Cary Grant came to visit the set and saw what Tippi was enduring and said, "I think you're the bravest lady I know." So there's another example of Cary Grant being a badass. But,
Yeah.
There's
Could you do a little more about that, Cary?
Oh, no, darling.
No.
And it's not Cary Grant's fault. I'm not going to throw Cary Grant
I'm not
under any
blaming him
bus.
at all. It's just...
Yeah, no, I totally. But at the same time, but again, this is 5 days that she has to endure this shit. Regardless of that, I mean, the sequence is effective, obviously, for what it's trying to do,
Yeah.
and it's another example. We're talking about the bluntness of it. 5 days of filming. It dives back into the obsessive nature of Hitchcock and the meticulous detail. The shower sequence in Psycho takes about as long to make because of all the different angles they were doing.
Yeah.
And then it is edited together in that montage way to suggest a lot of different angles of stuff happening with the birds. Because even with the birds as in control that they can be with a trainer, it's still scattered. And obviously they're to the point where the birds have to be, sodium processed into the film.
Well, and you still see that used a lot in a lot of like mainstay like horror. Today, even you'll see it in modern age. But one example that's like perfect for it is the original Texas Chainsaw.
Yeah.
Whereas the stigma to that is that film is really gory.
It's not.
There's blood. Yeah, but you don't see anything.
Yeah.
But because it does a lot of that type of scene cuts that you're talking about, you get that general feel because your imagination takes on, just goes to a different level, and it's just like it's really bad, and it's just no, the seed was planted there, and this comes back all to the first bird attack, the seed being planted early on in the film, and then it being watered throughout the way as it escalates.
Exactly, and Tobe Hooper does that a little bit, like sprinkles in some Psycho and the birds Twister and Thematicus with that. Like, I mean, Psycho especially because the editing of Psycho with the stabbing sequences that it has very much falls in line with what they do in Texas Chainsaw Massacre and also in 1978's John Carpenter's Halloween.
Yeah.
I mean, Black Christmas to an extent. I think Black Christmas is more explicit than it gets credit for.
Yeah.
I think it's also a little bit more brutal and ambiguous.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, and we get that scene. She comes back down. She gets saved by Mitch. She's brought down, and they give her brandy to wake up and try to get anesthetic and whatnot. And she's catatonic and whatnot.
Which, by the way, shows product of its time using brandy to wake up someone. you don't really.
I mean, like.
Back when people were putting whiskey on their kids' teeth and on their gums. I mean,
it's one of my favorite moments in There Will Be Blood. Is in a modern day movie. You just watch Daniel Day-Lewis feeding whiskey to a child. Yeah. I'm just like, of course Daniel Day-Lewis would do that. That's like a normal Sunday for him. While he cobbles shoes and sews dresses.
There's no mess with DDL. DDL does what he wants.
If I'm going to give your children whiskey, I'm going to give them whiskey.
This is a brandy set and a brandy set only.
Daniel Day-Lewis would have pissed off Alfred Hitchcock. He hated method actors. He had a problem with Montgomery Clift, obviously, on the set of I Confess. I just imagine Daniel Day-Lewis just pushing just desserts of treatment on Alfred Hitchcock for all the bullshit he put off. Daniel Day-Lewis just not suffering Hitchcock lightly. So the decision is made by Mitch and Lydia to Lydia's more apprehensive of this, to escape via car to drive to San Francisco. And what I think is one of my favorite scenes in the entire movie, and it's a scene that's been aped in other pieces of pop culture, is Rod Taylor going outside to get that car, coming back in and getting Melanie and the whole family into the car. It's the direct final evolution where man have become birds and birds have become the aggressor.
Yeah.
Where
it's finally shifted.
Yeah, he has to be as careful as a bird, because if he suddenly does anything, they're going to attack. Even when he does minor things that could be transgressions, the birds immediately respond.
Well, what's so cool about this scene, because and it's also just another monumental scene. Even The Simpsons did an honor to it with one of the Treehouse of Horrors, where the dolphins instead attack, and it's not the birds.
Yeah,
and so they're all walking out of the courthouse, and it's just a mob of dolphins, and they have to be really careful with what they do, and they try to push the character's buttons by Lisa trying to help one of the baby dolphins get soda rings off its snout, and it just bites her, and she's like, "You son of a," and just has to restrain herself because
I was gonna say there's another Simpsons episode that does this. It's not a Treehouse one. It's when Maggie goes to the daycare and she's trying to get her pacifier back, and the majority of it is a great escape montage.
Yeah.
But by the end of it, all the babies have their fucking pacifiers, and much like the soundtrack for this, the whole scene is just pacifiers going.
Yeah,
and
it just like trying to be very careful with like Homer trying to like, okay, Maggie, let's go home. Like trying to be just moving very slow.
I'm gonna find the clip and I'm gonna play it in the episode.
But you see that like it's such a small little thing that you don't give a second thought to, but it's played out in so many horror films. I mean, probably one Tremors 2.
Tremors,
in the scene where he has to go into that whole warehouse covered in nitrogen, and just like I think it's nitrogen, but like there's all like the walking tremors because he has to move not only very closely but quickly for the nitrogen to last because they see body heat and the nitrogen's like covering his body heat.
Yeah,
but he also can't make any loud noises.
Yeah,
and so like. You see that scene, even in Aliens with the eggs, like it's the same thing.
Yeah,
like it's just such a like weird small thing that we don't realize. God, a big mainstay in like the birds.
Yeah, and actually the Tremors, the Tremors allusion I think is fascinating too. And actually, there's another documentary on the Blu-ray where Ron Underwood, director of first Tremors, he talks about the influence that the birds has on something like Tremors. And so, like, obviously these are things that have, like...
Well, I mean, even... Sorry, I'm interrupting.
No, you're fine.
Well, I mean, shit, like, even on a more, like, bigger scale, not as many, but one big fucking terrifying thing, the T-Rex from Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
Although, that wouldn't like, they can still see... They'll still see you, like... Yeah. But the whole idea of, like, if we don't move... it won't notice us. Kind of like it's still there. Like that the whole mentality of like if we're really careful around these birds, they won't notice us. Maybe that's where they got the idea that the T-Rex wouldn't notice them if they didn't move. What
if the birds are aided by one of their ancestral ally called the T-Rex? Yeah. But anyway, he gets the car, he turns on the radio. The radio further solidifies the fact that there's no explanation for what's going on, no tangible explanation. It's just happening, and it seems like it's not relegated to Bodega Bay, but that it is the central anarchy of these birds is happening in Bodega Bay, and there's scattered attacks elsewhere. Yeah. So it could be spreading, it may not be spreading. It's kind of, and it also is like a precursor to an extent of what George Romero does with Night of the Living Dead, how he uses media as the communication tool for what's going on outside of that farmhouse. So Rod Taylor gets Melanie with Lydia, and they go out, and it's one of the greatest things about Tippi Hedren's performance combined with Hitchcock's direction. Is that when she's being let out, she's mostly silent, but when she sees those birds and reacts to their sound, she goes, no, no. And if you listen to the Hitchcock Truffaut interview, he explains that the way he asked Hedren to have that reaction, which I imagine, unfortunately, is also a combination of her exhaustion from what she endured. But the direction that was given was, I want you to reject the idea of going near those birds again like a child would.
Yeah.
And it's a very fascinating piece of direction and delivery that I think it's one of the most effective moments of a person saying, no, no, no. Like she is genuinely terrified that she will go through what she went through in the attic again.
Yeah.
And now, obviously that comes with the double-edged sword of the baggage that we've been discussing.
Right.
Is still a very effective scene. Obviously it's not worth the abuse that she endured.
I mean, I think it's admirable that she still gives it praise.
Yeah.
And she still owns up to it, because one could see it as her being brainwashed or still being a victim of the abuse, and that is a valid statement. But I also think it's also just kind of like a measure of her professionalism and just how much of a badass she is, because she has every right to demonize that whole movie.
Yeah.
But the fact that she still is like, like this was a huge mainstay in my art form, my personal career, despite what I went through, and like still owns it. Like she's not owning it to, praise Alfred. She's owning it because she's proud of it, because of what she did.
Yeah.
And so like, I think that's what makes it a little more kind of palpable to still watch it and still go through it, knowing that she's owning it for her own sake.
Exactly. And we get her in the car, She lies in Lydia's lap.
Yeah.
Says a mother relationship she's never had, because it should be noted, like she states early on in the film, her mother ran out on her, so it was just her and her father. So it turns the head on what we consider a female dynamic of a character from an emotional standpoint. It's why Evan Hunter is one of the more innovative writers for Hitchcock to an extent.
Well, and the thing is, man, with that scene alone, I mean, it not only is it doing what you just already said, but it's also just showing that, a hero can have multiple angles. It doesn't have to be a strict, one type. It doesn't have to go one direction with it. And you see this theme carried out with, like, even I always go back to it because it's just such a great example is Aliens.
Mm-hmm.
With Sigourney Weaver, looking out for the little girl.
Yeah.
I mean, probably the favorite line is "Get away from her, you bitch!" Like it's not her kid, but she's still, and you could argue that it's like a maternal instinct kind of kicking in, and that'd be fair too.
And it's a culmination of her terror from not just this film that she's experiencing, but also the previous Alien film where she's left alone on that frame.
But I think the biggest compliment we need to give to it is that it's just showing that we have a hero that is a decent person.
Yeah.
Overall, whether it's a guy or a girl in this case. That the fact that they're looking at the child is always a metaphor for innocence and purity. And so she's still taking care of that. She's watching out for that to make sure that it's not the last little depleted thing. I mean, you see that even a little kind of like off the subject, but still relatable is, what's that? I just had it on my head. It was the movie where it's like the last kid in the entire world. Nobody, like, no one can reproduce anymore. It's thought that
Children of Men.
Children of Men. Thank you. Like, kind of like you see that as the main theme throughout all Children of Men, where somebody's taking care of a kid.
Yeah.
And which is not just a kid, but like a hope, purity, innocence, so on and so forth.
Very much so.
And you see, and I firmly believe that kind of started with the birds, with what we're talking about here at this ending scene.
Yeah.
Is it the only example? Not at all. But it's a great example.
It's a primary starter, and especially towards that apocalyptic vision, because we're left with a final shot of them driving off past the house into their attempt to get to San Francisco. The birds have won. Before we discuss the thematic impact of that moment, it's poignant to note that final shot is composed of 32 isolated shots. All layered and matted together amidst Albert Whitlock's matte paintings.
Yeah.
It's 32 different pieces of film for one moment. And by record, it was the most difficult thing Hitchcock had to film on that film, let alone in his entire career, because of how technical it was and how specific it was.
Yeah.
And there's other endings to the film. Evan Hunter specifically said that there was the ending where you had them driving through the town and you see the destruction, so that it's not just isolated to them, but it's spreading everywhere.
Yeah. And
then there's a big highway, or the Pacific Coast Highway chase scene with the birds eventually poking their way through the top of a convertible, of the convertible that Melanie came in, and then them getting to safety. Another ending that Hitchcock joked about with an interview with Peter Bogdanovich was that they get to the Golden Gate Bridge and it's just littered with birds, which would have been hilarious. Like, if you were able to accomplish that with Whitlock's paintings combined with the technical feat, it would have been on the same epic scale as the end of Planet of the Apes when you have the Statue of Liberty. Obviously, it does not happen, and you can hear in the interview Bogdanovich and Hitchcock laughing about, like, wouldn't that have been fucked up? Like, what if their entire Golden Gate Bridge? But the ending leaves us on one of the most ambiguous notes of Hitchcock's career, and undeniably furthers the notion that ambiguity in your ending is a mainstream concept that can work. Obviously, the Coen brothers are very, very fucking good at that.
Yeah.
And amongst other directors, but the original intent was to not even have the studio logo at the end. He wanted it to end with just that sound kind of fading out with no indication of a studio logo or an ending. Universal insisted on putting a Universal release at the end of it, and so that's why it's done. There's an argument to be made if you just fade it to black and you still have that soundtrack going on as people are leaving the theater. It would be very, very ballsy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's something that I think mainstream audiences would have been fucked up with a little bit, but this is a time also where you are distinguishing this as a movie, and thus that process becomes full.
Yeah, absolutely.
So The Birds is released on March 28th, 1963, on a budget of $3.3 million, one of the most ambitious films Hitchcock's had to do to this date. It makes $11.4 million at the box office. The criticism of the film is the New York Times reviewer Bosley Crowther, who I have a mixed relationship with when it comes to reading his material, because if you read his history, it's interesting because he's an interesting cat.
Yeah.
But he was positive with it and said it was a horror film that should raise the hackles on the most courageous and put goose pimples on the toughest hide. And I absolutely agree with that. Not everybody was as enthused with it, but regardless, the movie made a lot of money, and it was it was close to on par with the success of Psycho in terms of how it transcended. But it also was a film that, unlike Psycho, was not as powerful with its reception to the audience, and it was actually a film that Europe embraced a little bit more than America did to a certain degree.
Yeah.
What's interesting is that, much like the trailer for Psycho, Hitchcock continues his penchant for being a cheeky fucker by making a trailer that I think, even with the grandiosity that is the Psycho trailer, the Birds trailer takes it up a step. I'm going to put the trailer in here right now so that you can all hear what I'm talking about.
How do you do? My name is Alfred Hitchcock, and I would like to tell you about my forthcoming lecture. It is about the birds and their age-long relationship with man. It will be seen in theaters like this across the country. In my lecture, I hope to make you all aware of our good friends, the birds. Theirs is a noble history, and through it all, man has played a conspicuous part. This cave drawing is one of man's earliest sketches of his feathered friend. One can see at once the loving care with which the artist depicted his subject. The story of man and his friends, the birds, is filled with many fine examples of ways in which these noble creatures have added to the beauty of the world. Take this plumed hat from the period of Charles I. How proud the birds must have been to have their feathers plucked out to brighten man's drab life. Here we have a later model, a refinement of the first. Here man, or rather woman, thought enough of the birds to have an entire one as a decoration. It's quite dead, of course. Naturally, the egg plays a very prominent part in my lecture. Not a word about which came first, however. I don't believe in dealing with controversial matters. Thousands of years ago, man was satisfied merely to steal an egg from a nest and use it for food. Now he has perfected this process by imprisoning each hen in a separate cage and by scientifically manipulating the lights so that she doesn't fall into the rut of the old 24-hour day. Thus, he can induce the bird to reach fantastic heights of egg production. Originally, there were many varieties of birds on Earth. Some have become extinct. The great auk, the passenger pigeon, and the famous dodo bird have all disappeared. Actually, they didn't exactly disappear. They were simply killed off. But of course, this is nature's way. Man merely hurries the process along whenever he can be of help. Man and birds have been responsible for a great many advances in our civilization. For example, the bird was the inspiration for the invention of gunpowder, and it was his speed that brought about the development of the shotgun. But man has not been unmindful of his debt to the bird. We have honored our feathered friends in many ways. We cage birds and show them off proudly in most of our zoos. And the turkey is traditionally our guest of honor at Thanksgiving. I suspect you never realized that if it weren't for birds, even some of our pastimes would suffer noticeably. duck hunting, for example. Granted, bagging a fellow hunter can be diverting, but the supply is rather limited. I hope you don't mind if I have something to eat, but I'm rushed today. Planning the lecture has been most educational for me. I've begun to feel very close to the birds and have developed a real sympathy for our little... What was I saying? Oh, yes, I've come to feel very close to the birds and have come to realize how they feel when... I don't think I'll eat just now. Hardly proper with all of you here. Surely the birds appreciate all we've done for them. Don't you? Beautiful cage, fresh water, no other birds to bother you, none of that blinding sunlight. Oh! Now, why would he do that? Most peculiar. What on earth?
They're coming!
So the trailer, for those of you who've just heard it, is Hitchcock giving a lecture on birds, and within the process of it, proving the point that humanity's been terrible to birds.
Yeah.
Whether it's him eating chicken or showing the plumage of a feather on a hat, and just being very coy and just, whatever. And then it has that shot of Tippi Hedren coming in, slamming the door behind her and going, they're coming. And then it cuts to that montage of the birds' opening credits sequence.
Yeah.
It's another great marketing tactic by Hitchcock to really, without showing footage from the film, give you an idea of what you might be in for. And it is a testament to his ability to market not just himself, but also his product. Obviously, the TV show practically sells itself on the concept of an opening monologue where he's just like, tonight's fucking story.
Yeah.
Here's a joke, and now here's here's this short film that somebody else made. But but the film is released one night. The film right after this is Marnie. We will talk about it on another episode, but that's where things get a lot worse for Hitchcock's career and also his legacy. But the only way he bounces back is in the early 70s with Frenzy, and then kind of leaves on a middling note with Family Plot. Family Plot's a good movie, but it's not up to the same level.
Yeah.
So The Birds obviously inspires a lot throughout pop culture, throughout horror history, throughout everything that we consider when we consider nature attacking humanity. We brought up Birdemic earlier, and I'll say, obviously it's in the pantheon of a midnight movie like The Room or Fateful Findings and stuff like that. But ultimately, Birdemic, when you watch it, its problem on a technical level is obviously it's using very, very crappy bird effects that don't understand foreground and background interaction with each other. It's very much just pasted on there. But it's interesting that this concept of birds and nature attacking humanity and whatnot is still a poignant theme that carries throughout, and it's becoming even more prescient with recent discussions about where global warming is at and how our planet's fucked. But and so it's a concept that is carried on through time. There was a sequel to The Birds called The Birds 2: Land's End. I wish it was called The Flappening. Would have been great. The Birds 2: Land's End. It was released in 1994 as a television sequel, directed by Rick Halloween 2 and Halloween Resurrection Rosenthal. Movie was so terrible that he went under the name Alan Smithy for this, which is a very common thing for people to do when they need to be disassociated from
Yeah.
it. Tippi Hedren does return, but she returns as a character named Helen that has nothing to do with the previous film.
Yeah.
It's I have not seen it. This is something I should have watched in preparation just to be like, oh boy, what the hell is this? But I'll tell you what, for the listening audience, I will watch it at some point and give you a little mini episode where I talk about how this is all a terrible idea. Because at the end of the day, I think the birds, it's funny because we go back to Robert Boyle talking about this as a mood piece, and regardless of the narrative structure of the birds, it's still a mood piece. Really is still a mood piece.
Yeah.
It relies on the atmosphere, especially throughout the entirety of it. So, we're about to the wrap-up point here, but is there anything you wanted to bring up about the legacy of the birds and just where it stands to this day in the horror pantheon?
I mean, I would definitely say that whether you are a veteran or you're new to the horror genre in general, if you ever had the general inquiry of like why films are the way they are, horror films have the same themes or kind of are all ride within the same context in a way. The Birds is just kind of a must have to start to watch. And when you watch The Birds, you get an idea of where this all started, where everything that we see in horror now started. And fact of the matter is, with all the controversies behind it, and I already said it, Tippi Hedren didn't already own it. She owns it, which makes me okay watching the film. Definitely give it a shot, man. I mean, I know the biggest thing that kind of like pushes people off about it is that it's an old film. And so that has like a boring stigma to it. But if
morons now.
But if you can look past that, man, like Birds is a great film. Like,
yeah,
without a doubt, it's still a great mainstay in just film and horror in general. And really, if you wanted to know where all of our creature features and everything in horror comes from, Birds is a great place to start.
Yeah.
Man. I mean, it's probably like the most bittersweet legendary film of all time.
I agree. I'm in the place of like, with regards to the production history, The Birds is still a movie that can be watched isolated from that merit while not ignoring it. It's similar to how I feel about Grindhouse these days, because for all I love about Grindhouse, I also understand what Rose McGowan went through. Not to mention anybody else that could have been possibly hurt damage from that film.
Yeah.
And it's strewn about the legacy of the Miramax and Weinstein Company. Is just like, for all the great films that they made, you have to understand that nearly every one of them is tainted in some form or fashion by something that could be directly related to that production history. So
I mean, you can still enjoy something while ignoring the bad things behind it, if that makes sense. I know it's like a really kind of hard statement to make, but I guess I would more so mean like just The Birds in this example, just because that's a whole conversation in itself. Is watch it, at the very least, watch it for Tippi.
I agree. I mean, Hitchcock's style is all over this film, and there's an appreciation you can have for it, but I think it's important to watch it for what Tippi is able to contribute, not just to that film, but also to the legacy of horror, because ultimately, like, we give proper praise to Janet Leigh for being like the innovative scream queen of the early '60s and the granddaddy of slasher films.
Oh yeah, for
but
sure.
The bottom line is that Tippi Hedren is one of the forefront of like a strong character that persists throughout the majority of that film up until maybe like the last 5 minutes of the movie. When she
showed that a woman doesn't have to be completely helpless in a horror film.
Yeah.
In order to be likable.
Yeah.
And like now that sounds like so alien to say that, 2020, but back then, like, it was revolutionary. You didn't really see that shit.
Yeah. And it's not overt on its face. Like, you have to dig deep with The Birds to understand what the strength can be, while also understanding of where we've come since then. I do think, like, I mean, obviously without Janet Leigh, you don't have Jamie Lee Curtis for biological reasons. But if you look at it though, the ability for Jamie Lee Curtis to be able to do something like H2O or even Hollow Green, his situation that comes from somebody like Tippi Hedren, where there's agency to the character in a horror movie. Regardless if it's a stepping stone of that nature, it's still there. So, Matt, I want to thank you for coming down and talking about the birds.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Yeah, flapping our wings about the birds.
The flapping.
What if I made a pun? I love stoned Hitchcock. It's lovely. But where can people find Punk Rock Horror Podcast and all your work?
Oh man, we're all over the place. The only place we're not on right now is iHeart. But we're purely just because I don't really give a shit to get on iHeart at the moment. Like, if I'm going to be brutal, like,
it's kind of an afterthought for us too.
like no offense, like iHeart and whatnot, but like I just don't. We'll eventually get on there. It's not at the biggest priority, but you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, Player FM, Stitcher, on our website www.punkrockHorrorPodcast.com. We also have a YouTube. We're now getting into video. It is definitely a huge undertaking for us because we've never done video before. So we're recording this coming weekend, which by the time you guys listen to this would be the 19th.
I mean, we've got a bit of a delay and whatnot, but like, yeah, I can work with that, but like,
but no worries, man. We also have a patreon.com / Punk Rock Horror Podcast. Please consider going over there. We have a lot of tiers with great rewards. Yeah, man, we're all over the place. We have Facebook / Punk Rock Horror Podcast, Twitter @officialprhp, and our Instagram, Punk Rock Horror Podcast. We're really good on all those. We like to talk to all of our listeners about horror.
You are great with interacting.
Thank you.
Like I do appreciate how great you are with interacting. It's always tough, obviously, with schedules being what they are for any podcaster to interact. But you guys do a very good job.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Doing that.
Yeah, man. But yeah, so check us out. Give us likes and follows, and if you like what you hear, please consider leaving us a 5-star review on iTunes. We definitely want to stand out more. We're this year being about technically our third year since publish. We're definitely being more focused on making a bigger name for ourselves, and also just connecting with the horror scene here in Colorado overall.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is a big, huge thanks to my co-host Cody, and also our new crew that we have. In the entirety of just everyone working on this, PRHP has become this bigger thing than we thought it was going to be, and it continues to get bigger. It's kind of overwhelming, but don't get me wrong, we're completely humbled and grateful for everybody's support. It means a lot to us. And again, thank you for bringing me on here, man.
No, I'm humbled that I could get you on here. That's the mentality of Shamley was just doing it and seeing what happened. This has been a big experiment. That's why there's no structure to it yet. It's mainly because it's kind of hard to schedule a Hitchcock podcast by going through each film individually.
Yeah.
And that's was a motivating factor, but also it's just let's mix it up and create some variety. But it all starts with, just trying an idea and see what's happening. Like the reception that we've had for the podcast has been shocking to say the least. So, when having people like you come on board to talk about a level of expertise.
What do you mean, you people?
What do you? What if it got very weird at the end? Alma, I'm going to be a podcaster. Fuck the movies. I'm sorry. My Hitchcock is starting to turn into a Patrick Stewart. It's nice to have people come on with an expertise level to talk about movies like this. I mean, obviously, all the guests that I've had have an expertise in their individual realms, and what I like about what you've done is we've managed to talk about a subject that's needed to be discussed on this show, but also managed to dissect this film in a proper manner. So I do thank you for coming aboard and bringing that Punk Rock Horror Podcast vibe into here to really kind of dissect this.
Thank you. Yeah, and if you never heard our show before, what we talk is, if it's okay if I kind of explain.
Absolutely.
So what we do is we started the show to focus on the movies that we love, the horror movies that we love, which has mostly been B and indie horror films. Mm-hmm. And what started with us just wanting to talk about horror and just review these movies became a platform, a spotlight for indie creators and indie horror creators.
Yeah.
And so every other week we come out with 2 episodes where we talk about either a serial killer or just a subgenre in the horror genre, and we talk about the history behind it, why I love it. We'll sometimes bring on guests, and then on that following Friday we will always review 2 movies that we feel that were either horribly underappreciated or overlooked and are related to that theme and deserve a lot of love. So kind of what you already mentioned with Ted Bundy, our most recent one is we talked about the history of Ted Bundy, how, he came to be, how he died, and then we reviewed 2 movies about him that we feel kind of really did a good job kind of summarizing everything about
what he's done. Which those are great episodes, and by the way, and when Matt and Cody talk about the 2 films side by side, it becomes a very fascinating dissection and discussion. One that has definitely motivated me in regards to upcoming episodes. One of which, not next episode, but the episode after that. We're going to be talking about The Man Who Knew Too Much back to back. I mean, and obviously it's not horror, but
it counts.
Side by siding those 2 comparisons, especially like the Michael Haneke episode with the Funny Games episode was a very big breakthrough for me of how to jump into that logic. So
yeah, that one was I was really happy to do that one. I'm really glad Cody did the movie Funny Games too. I'm glad he did his review on that. That movie overall, like just Funny Games in itself, is just a really good movie. Like I said, there's only one scene in the remake that just really just kind of bugs me.
I know,
just because it's such a long. I get why it's there. I totally get it, but it's just such a long scene.
Don't spoil it. Make people watch. Make people watch that damn movie.
But you'll know it when you see it. Feel free to fast forward a little.
But thank you again, Matt, for coming on. I appreciate you sitting down and chatting with us.
Thank you, man.
You can listen to the Shamley Silhouette on RealNerdsPodcast.com. You can find us on Instagram at the Shamley Silhouette. We drop episodes every 2 weeks. At this point, we're getting back into the mode, so be patient if we maybe skip a week. Just trying to make sure we get this series finished correctly.
Right.
You can also look out for articles are coming back to the website. There's been a backup of those. They will be coming out back to the website. On the next episode, we will have the return of our first ever guest. We may talk about something very simple, or we may talk about something very important. So stay tuned for that. But until that happens, this has been the Shamley Silhouette. And
also, man, real quick, I just want to say one more time, shout out to you and Real Nerds and everything you're doing.
Thank you.
I'm not going to, I know you've had a lot of personal stuff that you've gone through and that you come back from.
Yeah.
And I just want you to know, man, I think it's really admirable that you came back and you're coming back strong.
Yeah.
I follow you on Instagram. I see a lot of your milestones, and I just think you're a pretty badass dude overall.
Oh yeah.
Shout out to Real Nerds and everybody who works on it and everything you're doing, man. Right on.
I'll tell you, Shamley only went away primarily because one, I went into production on a film, and the other one was just I'll be frank about it on there. I lost my job. But, at the end of the day, this show has to come back regardless of any setbacks because it's been a prime factor to keep me going. And having conversations like this with you are motivating factors to keep going because at the end of the day, I'm by no means an expert. I didn't get a PhD in film. I dropped out of film school, guys. But, this keeps me going. And just at the very least, if I can talk to somebody who understands that genre or that film or that director with a level of at least, their own personal expertise, it helps open the door for films like Hitchcock's or Tippi Hedren's to be explored and dissected. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, definitely, man. I know I'd love to come back on. I know if Cody can make it too, he'd like to be here too.
You know what? We'll talk about it off mic, but I think I got a film that you two might have fun with. It's not traditionally a horror movie, but it may be a fun Hitchcock talk.
All right.
But until next time, good night.
Maggie, time to go to the...